All right.
All right.
All
So
right.
we were talking about that the body, mind, feeling complex, the satipatthana,
Yeah. Feelings is a basic
is
word for it.
is it's useful to pull it apart in order to get the various aspects of it,
Mm,
but that it's really an integral whole.
mm,
An example of that would be like the body of an automobile and the automobile engine. Neither one of them are of much value without the other, in the
mm.
sense that you can take the engine out and then you can sit in the car and do zoom zoom and move the wheel, but you're not going anywhere. Or you can go sit on that motor and get your butt burned, but you're not going anywhere. It's
Yeah.
only that, in fact, this is a typical example of general systems theory. General systems theory, one of the postulates is that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yes. Hmm.
Okay, what does that mean with the transportation? Automobile is that it's the transportation that is greater than the sum of the parts of the automobile.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I know what you mean here. Yes.
All right.
Exactly.
Well, now we can look at the human being as an integrated whole in the sense that it also has functions. And we can use that same word would be transportation, but in also the case of the human being, it would not be just transportation, but it would also be intelligence. So intelligence itself is something that's greater than the whole. It's the whole part of the body that's greater than the sum of the parts.
And in that sense, I think that's what all yoga, I mean, the yoga is all meant to awaken intelligence, not just like, not just, intellect, but I mean like real, um, I've heard another name for it, and maybe this might be a hard word to understand in the sense of the witnessing state of a type of discernment, like, in that sense. And that's what I feel is happening in that sense, where there's a dissociation between the body and the awareness or consciousness. I don't know the right word in Buddhism, because Buddhism has a very hard way to understand this word, because I learned there's awareness, and then there's individuality. There's an individual, and that individual thinks, you know basically he's an individual, and that's not correct, because he's that's just one frame of
Basically,
reference.
that goes back to Descartes,
Yeah,
the
I think therefore I
philosopher,
am. Hmm.
right? That's completely wrong.
Yeah, it is wrong.
The
It's
correct way of
impossible.
saying it is I think, therefore I think I am.
Hmm.
That in fact that individual that you're speaking of is actually let us call it a linguistic tool or a handle or a way of naming something that is actually the results of um, the unity that is that which is greater than the sum of the parts.
Hmm.
But there is no individual there. There is no me there. There is no self there. There is no, for instance, and this is the reason why the Buddha talks about the five aggregates the way that he does. The
Hmm.
five aggregates are actually an introduction to Paticca Samuppada in the part that look at the body itself. There is no self in the body. There is no me in the body itself. So when we say my body, that's actually just a linguistic tool or a trick, but it causes confusion because people really do think that not only is it my body, but that there's a my or a me in there that
Yeah.
owns that body. The case. And the easy way to understand that is, and that even Jesus said it, that you cannot change your stature not one whit, but we can go further than that. You're not a changeling. You can't be an old man today and a young girl tomorrow and a snake next week and all of that kind of stuff. You don't have the kind of control of the body that when you're a baby, you have a baby's body. And as the body itself matures, the individual can have a whole lot of different thoughts about the body, but he has no control over that body.
And
Very.
this is exactly the point of when you get older. For some people, the consciousness peaks at the sense of they get conscious of their life, but that's as far as it goes. They don't get conscious of actually the outer experience. What they don't get conscious of, basically the unconscious, like the things that they didn't look at before, or maybe the things that they missed, or maybe
Mhm.
just bigger, unknown, the things that are unknown to them, that are not known. In that sense, that are not witnessed yet. And in that sense, I've heard that the goal of meditation, from one of my first, I guess I would consider him a teacher in this sense, is that he said that the goal is, at least for a beginner, is to get to the point where the field of action can be discerned from the witness, that the action would not be something that is done, but would be seen as an action. And that's what we're doing, because that's exactly what changed when you said those words. No, Dennis, it's just confusion. That I understood that unwholesome is unwholesome, wholesome is wholesome, that there's no need to fear. There is no set rules here
Mhm.
in that sense. And for me is like, obviously we're going to experience, if you work on this practice, you're going to experience basically uh the witness, in that sense of like, you're going to witness everything in that sense. What happens in your body, what happens in your mind. But there's a point where it becomes like, okay, everything that's happening isn't me, and that's overwhelming. Like, I literally had this experience the other day where I was happy, I was calm, but my mind wouldn't stop running. It was running like really aggressively without my permission. Like, it was kind of like really going, like it always does without my permission. Like, but this
Like
time,
any wild animal that
eh,
is
but
untrained.
but in that sense, I wasn't like allowing it to overcome. I was like, okay, well, stay calm. Right now, at this moment, it seems like it was just my body and mind. I think it was just because um I was enduring, let's just say, in that sense. I was still there, but I knew that my mind was kind of like, I just needed to get alone for a little bit. I knew I was okay, but I needed to kind of reset it up. Like, endure, be happy in that sense. Um, but even then, like, for some reason, it seems like, because the bliss, and I mean, I don't like to use that. I don't. You don't like to use that word, but the sukha, and
Hmm.
the bodily pleasure is mixed with the awareness, right? You can't separate the two, because it seems like I've had people that they have this experience, and I've had the experience where it seems like there becomes depressed, depersonalized, numb out, zen. Oh my God, like, they're enlightened, but there's no life. There's no life. There's no juice. There's just, I'm witness. I just stand here as a witness, and nothing's happened. Like, and is the goal of the practice to integrate that, basically the right view into your life, like consciousness, that we would embody our life with that sense of unboundedness. But how is that possible? How can you keep your body and your personal life if you ultimately experience what the Buddha said, unbounded consciousness, which is basically not my life, not my body, not anything. It's not anything you can say or word in that sense, because people, obviously, they have to face the fact that your ego, in the sense, your individuality will dissolve eventually. Not in the sense you're going to die, but there's definitely going to be a sense of your bull crap needs to die. And by, even if it's like, the practice will come out, it will make it come out. And I felt that over the past days, where it's like, there's a feeling within this, there's a feeling that holds this all together, and it's called restlessness. and that's the thing that I've been experiencing.
I would say no. I would say, and let me at least
Yeah, yeah,
interject here.
please.
No, the restlessness is what pulls apart the unity.
Yeah, yeah.
Restlessness does not bind us together.
Hmm.
That restlessness is, in fact, it's the response or the reaction to something deeper.
Yeah. Explain this,
And what
please.
is that deeperness? The deeper is fear.
Yes, exactly. Okay, we're getting
All right.
somewhere here.
But 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 going back, let's just go back a bit. You've covered
Please.
quite a lot of territory. One of the things that we can do is we can look at the word that you're using, consciousness, because the way that you're using consciousness is the typical Western way,
Hmm.
and that along with that we have things like subconscious and unconscious and that kind of stuff,
Hmm.
to where there's another kind of consciousness. And so we're actually going to be using the word in two different ways. One is sense consciousness. Sense consciousness, and there are four, five, six, six senses. So when you are, let us say, when you are chewing a morsel of food, you have a number of sensations inside of the mouth. We roll things around with the tongue, we place it under the teeth, we chew on it. We also experience the juice, and often will swallow the juice and leave the fibers to be rechewed. We also do things like taste, and so there's a lot of stuff going on in that morsel of food. Actually, our whole life is like that because we do generally have all of the senses. And in fact, one of the issues of hot cuisine would be that the food has to look good.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, and so we bring the appetizing quality of the food in with more than one sense. And that each one looking at the food is different than observing the juice to swallow, which is different from the actual taste of the food, etc. So we're actually using several senses to it, but that whole quality, the whole unit of all of those things, then comes up to a different kind of experience. And that experience that we're talking about is that other kind of consciousness.
This is called like, and from what I in my past, the name was cosmic consciousness in the sense of wholeness, unity
Well,
consciousness.
actually, let's go a little bit more in detail and we can get highfalutin later.
Please, and the right terms, because sometimes the me, because I came from the tantric background and we have words like ahamkara and things like that in the sense of like, and it's really similar if you really take out the magic, if you really take out the magic, and that's really what's been helping me is taking out all these magical terms and replacing them with something more grounding.
Mhm. Real. Good.
Exactly, something less
All right.
you know.
So, um, the Buddha actually used the word sanya in two different ways. But normally we use two different Pali words. One is consciousness or the sense consciousness, and then the other consciousness is, let us call it the figuring out consciousness or the understanding consciousness. The example is, oh, I see the tree, is one kind of consciousness, see the tree. The second kind of consciousness is, oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, I'm seeing what I see what you mean.
I see what you mean. Now, this kind of consciousness is referred to as an internal sense organ or salayatana, to where the word atana is actually all of these senses. But then there's a salayatana, an internal sense. And
This is
basically it works like this, that when we see something with the eye, we have the eye and the object, and that is sight. Sight then is processed, and that processing is, we use the term in English of perception. We perceive. Now, if you look at that word perception closely, it means that we perceive, the word "see," that we're looking. So, um, perceiving or perception means that which happens immediately before we see.
yeah,
So the
okay.
outcome of perception is actually seeing as one form of sense. In fact, all of the senses, because the Salayatana then is a combination of all of the other senses, some of which play bigger parts than the other. Now, what perception does is it basically, um, let's look at it this way. The distinction is going to be between the architectural drawings of a building, all of the pile of materials that it takes to make that building, and the building itself after it's completed.
Yes, okay.
Okay, you got those three things?
The
All right.
architectural drawing, the architect,
Right.
the components.
The components, and then the building after it's built.
Okay, yeah, the finished work. Okay, I
Okay.
see.
So we can see then that the architectural drawings is one kind of consciousness, and the actual building itself is another kind of consciousness.
Oh, okay. So see, this is where the wording is. When you say consciousness, you mean awareness of that, of a thing. Something is in the presence
I'm
of
going to intentionally avoid the word awareness.
okay, I don't want because I'm not playing that game of like awareness is God, but like in the sense of because I know the whole thing about how some people think awareness is the whole thing. And but like you mean in the sense of like you become there's a I know.
I know, that's it.
There we
Okay,
go.
that's the
Okay, yeah.
building.
Okay. Okay.
The architectural drawings is, what is this? And then the building itself is,
Oh.
I know.
And then what is the components?
That and the components are the sankara. All of the stuff that you use to construct that building with only the idea of the sense input of the tree. So 99% of what I do when I say I see that tree is not the actual site. It's the taking of the old trees that I've got inside, cataloging them, coming through and recognizing that that object, in fact, is not a stump, it's a tree. It's not a house, it's a tree. It's not an airplane, it's a tree. How do I know that? Is because I've got all of these building materials in my mind called Sankara that I use to manufacture my understanding of what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and this is where creativity and the sense of memory comes
Right.
from.
Okay. So you can say then that creativity is nothing but taking a mental sense and mental building materials of the mind and create and concocting something that we call salayatana.
Yeah, and a very
The
clear
salayatana then is the internal representation that is our knowing. We become conscious of it. An
mm,
example of that would be, you see someone coming, you process that, and you come up with a consciousness of danger.
and this is
And
really the foundation for a meditator, right? Is to start from
mhm.
this place of starting to break down the sankharas in that sense.
Well,
Like the personality view
at
is
least
one.
break down the at least break down the process, because what this begins to point out is that no one, no animal, no life form actually lives in reality. We live in a mentally constructed reality, and we construct that mental reality based upon sensory input plus our old set of building materials.
Hmm.
So, what
Yeah.
we see with the eye is like the architectural drawings, and what we come up with, the building, is based upon all of the building materials that we use to build that building.
Okay. This is kind of
Okay.
weird. Like it makes you feel in the sense, okay, like, and I've heard the thing about taking the splinter out because some people get confused. How can you use all this to free yourself if the thing is the trap? But I've heard like the splinter taking out the splinter, and this
Okay.
is yeah,
This
yeah,
is
and
what
this
the Buddha would call action that leads to the end of action.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And we spoke about this before, and
All
then
right.
the question would be is because it's if you like again if you're committed and you follow this, what begins to happen little by little, I've seen it, is is that you're basically your senses and it feels like your senses are there, they're alive, like you're not thinking, it's like you're it's weird, it feels like life is living itself,
Hmm.
and it's really beautiful, like it's incredibly beautiful, but in the sense of
Well, that's up to you, depending upon your sankharas and which sankharas you're going to use to construct a beautiful world. All you really have is sensory input. It's what to you to do to make it into a beautiful world.
so
You
is
have to make
Buddhism,
sense of it.
so then why isn't it said in the sense of refinement of perception?
Ask that question again.
Why could it be said like a lingo could be said like the refinement of perception, refining your perception, and in the sense of like you keep digging until the right view is like so ingrained, because right view is what really set it off for me, in the sense of like your personality is really not in the way of your life, and that already is something that really embodies you in that sense.
All right. Let's give another example. The example that I'm giving you now, I will call OCR. Do you know what the word OCR means?
Mm-mm.
Okay. It actually stands for optical character recognition. All right. You know with the computer that you've got that there's a difference between text and an image.
Hmm. Yeah.
What does that mean? That means in a search engine you can type in the word, and then the text of that word can be found. But if that word is on an image, then the search is not going to find it.
If that word is on an image, what do you mean?
Well, let us say that you have a video, and the image on the video, at the beginning of the video, it'll have the title of the video embedded right in the video. But that's an image,
Yeah.
it's not
Okay.
actual text.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's go to it a little bit deeper. Anything that's actually on a piece of paper, even if it's text, is still just an image.
Yeah.
You cannot put that piece of paper into the computer and then scan and have the computer find the text on that image. However, there is a product called OCR, and how it came about was IBM was working with the post office in order to find a way to sort mail. And in the very, very beginnings, you actually had to have a stylized way. And the first one that they did was Courier, because Courier was the typeface that was used on most typewriters. But if it was script, then the new computer machine that IBM built couldn't process the script.
Okay.
Also, it could not process many other kinds of stuff, envelope addresses, because they were not in the font that the original OCR knew.
Mm.
For instance, if it was courier and it went to that address, it can say, okay, I can read that. I know what address it goes to, and I'll put this in that particular bucket to go off to that city or whatever. But if it's in um, uh, Times New Roman or some silly script,
Mm.
then if the computer doesn't have that script stored, then it can't make any sense out of it. Just like if you open a book that has Sinhalese, a whole book of Sinhalese, you can't make any sense out of it because you don't have what each character is stored by and how it's used in relationship, like A and B and C. You know that. And you might even know some Greek with alpha and gamma and delta, but you don't have any clue about either the Thai script or the Sinhalese. Okay. So now let's go to OCR for a moment. OCR is normally a software package that you can now buy and put on the computer, and some of those software packages are very, very sophisticated. But one of the things that's very, very interesting about it is that most of these software packages get their database from two places. One is all of the TTF fonts that are stored in Windows. Every font that Windows knows about, plus you can get some new ones.
Mm.
So, for
Yeah.
instance, when you're in Microsoft Word, you can take it and you can put it in Helvetica, you can put it in Sans, you can put it in Times Roman, you can put it in Courier, any different ones because the fonts are stored in the computer, which means the OCR software can take a page that is photographed or scanned in as an image, and then look at that image line by line, actually even finding out where lines are. And then the OCR software, will look in the font database to see if that character that we've just discovered fits in our database so we can make sense out of it.
Yeah.
And so if it's the letter S, then we can put into our computer code. It's called ASCII, by the way. There's other computer codes. There's Bardo. There is EPIDEC or EBCDIC. IBM had one. There's many different coding systems, even Morse code, but we don't hardly ever use Morse code anymore. In fact, we don't generally use Bardo. But what we do is we use ASCII. And so whatever representation, the bits of an ASCII code for S, it'll say, okay, that's an S or that's that code. Now, look at what my finger is doing. What's the difference between this? Notice that what I'm doing. You already know what I'm doing. And
It's
now
the A.
this. And now watch my finger for the second one. It's
Mhm.
exactly the same thing, except that one's at a 90-degree angle.
Oh
This
my
one,
God. No, it's funny because I thought you were making the eight, the slide, the first one was the little eight on the side because you were doing this. It looked like you were doing
actually, no,
this.
I'm drawing this way. I'm drawing maybe it's because of the camera. Okay, let me do it this way.
Oh, okay.
What is that?
Like a wave.
No, it's the infinity signal. Look at it. Look at the infinity.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see it now. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hmm.
All right, then you turn it on its edge and it goes like this. What is that?
Um,
It's a number 8. Look at it
yeah.
again.
Okay. I see it. Yeah. You flip it on its side. You said, yeah, it's eight. Yeah.
Uh huh. Okay. So, how is the OCR software going to know the distinction between an infinity sign and an 8?
I don't know. It
Well,
has
you
to
didn't
have it
write
in
the
its thought.
software. I have.
Yeah.
I know exactly how you do it. You have to get a frame of reference or an orientation.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That it's like the individual the Saliatana only has one frame of reference, which is the personality view, right?
but it comes from the processing of taking the visual input and the sound input and our proprioceptive input and our touch input and all of the various inputs
And trying to make sense of it.
and trying to make sense out of it. How
And
do
this
we
is
make sense out of it? We do that by the art of perception, and the art of perception uses a database of memories.
this is
So if
like
you don't have
yeah.
an infinity character stored in your database, then the OCR software won't know what to do with that infinity sign. Even though he can tell that it's a character, he does not know what character it is. Just like you don't know that Sinhalese character or that Thai character or that Chinese character. You don't have that stored in your database.
Mhm.
A lot of people don't have other things stored in their database, like love and kindness and generosity.
Yeah. Well,
but
actually, what do we
what
do,
do they
don't we?
have their but what do they have in their stored in their database is competition, moral judgments. Uh, this is right, this is wrong,
Okay.
and
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah.
feel bad. Okay, so when
Yeah.
they see an object, they'll pull up out of their database through perception to make sense out of it. And so the sense that they make out of it, the actual, um, in the OCR language, the actual character that we come up with may in many cases be wrong because we don't have, for instance, an OCR package may not be able to do Sinhalese at all because you don't have a Sinhalese font put in your font database. But I can go online and I can go get a Sinhalese font, put it in the database, and now when I scan a Sinhalese piece of paper or a piece of paper that's got Sinhalese written on it, then the OCR software can read and turn into ASCII code, extended ASCII, these Sinhalese characters.
Okay. And this is the whole thing. Like, is there ever a point where we would, well, I don't want to talk about that far ahead, maybe. It's better to just say where I'm at right now in the sense of,
Okay.
like, right now where I'm at, in the sense of what we're talking about, is that I can see that the internal sense, I can see that very clearly that really what's making all of this happen is this internal sense. It's really not my eyes. It's really not because my eyes, I really can't like grab my eye in that sense with my mind, you know. The perception really can't grasp anything. Like really like really like hold it and like it's real like in that sense. Um so but what's underneath all of that sensing like individual like frame of reference when you start practicing, it feels like there's like we've talked about this actually. And this is and it's really interesting because it's felt always in my chest. It's always felt at the bottom of it is fear. It is. But it's almost like I've touched this fear before. I'm not going to say how, but I have had experiences of intense fear and terror that turn into extreme states of amazingness. Because but the thing is you don't have to suffer just because you're afraid. Like I don't believe that. I don't believe that, oh, because my body's reacting for something that's been happening forever.
Okay.
I don't need to
But you
to
do realize that, in fact, fear is number one, it's the primary motivator, not
Mhm,
just for humans, but for all life forms,
mhm. Yeah,
especially
yeah.
dogs
Mhm.
and cattle.
Yeah.
That's the primary motivator, is fear. Okay. Why is that true? Because without fear as a motivator, the entire species, whatever species that we're referring to, is going to get wiped out.
Yeah, we're gonna stop eating and living.
That the wildebeest, if they're not afraid of the lions, are not going to herd. They're not going to go into a self preservation instinct behavior.
Yeah, well, we won't do anything out of having to anymore if we overcome that basically it's not like intense. I'm sorry for using the word terror. It's just
Mhm.
that in that sense I have experienced that, but it was because when I was younger I did things that forced that. It wasn't like I did meditation or anything like that. Um but in meditation that can happen, but not all the time. Um but in the sense like there is a fear in the sense that because really when you get down to it like because I really like talking to people about Dhamma, but sometimes like I think like it's the fear of death that everybody kind of circles around and wants to avoid, like in that sense. Oh my
Well,
gosh,
what do you think the self-preservation instinct is all about?
well yeah, in that sense, and because in my life I've
It's
already
the
like
self-preservation instinct, and basically that's also is a misnomer. It
yeah,
should
and
be called the organism preservation instinct. And the organism preservation instinct is one of the qualities of uh, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Our
mhm,
instincts actually then are designed to keep us alive.
which is good. It's not horrible. It's not bad, but
Not at all.
it's the wrong view of it in that sense that for some reason still like
Actually, a better way of talking about it is that the problem is too many false positives.
this is what I was exactly going to say because you said that it's not that there's good in us, it's that we're taught there's good, there's better, there's something better than us, or in the sense, better, the feeling of inadequacy comes from that polarity
Hmm.
of like, oh, there's something but like as you practice you realize that no, it's just a moment and whatever is appropriate to this moment. How can I handle this with wisdom? Wisdom is better than
Hmm.
just wisdom is spontaneous with joy. It doesn't have any reason in that sense. Like it may have, but it does it like consciously. It's not ignorant. But because in my life, because that's like the existential thing for everyone, it's like my life as I know it is not what is true. So like this feeling as you practice, because people like to make it, for me I want to overcome it. I don't want to make it a story like, oh, it's a fear and because of my mom. No, like I know my mom and me are good. We're not like there's not no one's perfect. I know that no one's going to reconcile the past has been reconciled, but it seems like this body is an interference in the sense of like the perception of my body having a body, my body, I am a body, I have ears, I have nose, this is my mom, my life, all is predicated because I have a body.
Hmm.
But I'm not like doing that on purpose. It's like as more as I practice anapanasati, it's clear to me that the biggest obvious thing in front of me is that this body is the very thing that's passing away before my eyes in every moment. It's changing, it's coming,
It's
it's
changing, constantly in flux. Everything is changing.
but how can, because I'm not dying right now. Like this body is not falling apart. But as you meditate, you do feel like there is something falling apart because I'm not my body. I'm something that's way more internal in the sense that's even an illusion. That God, I got it. Okay, I got it. This is what I really, really wanted to say. Is that what I'm experiencing is that there's more of a feeling instead of a body.
That's how you're
That's
going to experience your body. How can you experience your body if you don't feel it?
Yeah, but before I practiced, I always thought like I always had this very engrossed, like really like I'm a body. I have issues. This
No,
is
you are
my
not.
body. Yeah, like that's what I thought. Like I really life on, but now it seems like the mind just is in this state of like in the chit is that properly a chitta, a feeling, or is it a vijnana? I don't know which one it was. Or vedana,
Um,
vedana.
Generally, the Buddha uses two different words for the mind.
Yeah.
The higher mind, the human part of the mind, the Pali word is mana or menu. and that the lower part of the mind, that which needs to be trained, that which is in the Satipatthana, is the chitta. Okay, and that chitta actually has various components, but mostly it is the thinking feeling complex.
This makes a lot of sense now. Yeah.
And the mana
Yeah.
is the higher mind or the frontal cortex, and that's one that can, let us say, understand and put things together in a way that a dog cannot. The dog can actually recognize friend or foe. Like for instance, the owner comes, but that the owner, the way that he's dressed, the dog doesn't pay any attention to. But if the owner of the dog comes and the family is there, they can tell a whole lot of stuff about the owner, their family member, by the way that he's dressed. For instance, disheveled and muddy. The dog doesn't see the disheveled and the dirty and the muddy. This is something that the humans are able to do. Okay, we can put things in context, and the context that we use to put things into is that very same thing, the sankara. And so not only do we take sensory input, but we store it differently than the way that the dogs do. So that now we can go and get that stuff back up. So that we can now do our own OCR with the images that the eye sees, and we can make sense out of that. We can actually understand that text because we've got those fonts stored, and the dogs don't have those fonts stored up. They don't have those sankaras, nor do they even have the mechanism for doing the storage.
It's like weird because when I medit when I'm practicing Dhamma and I'm walking, sitting, whatever I'm doing, if I get into like a sukha investigation and all the five factors, and I'm really going and I'm really
Mm-hmm.
just intending, and there seems to be like this point where it becomes so like fo- I don't like to use the word focus, but maybe it becomes, oh, I know the perfect word actually, unification. It becomes unified
Mm-hmm.
to such a degree that it almost feel like I'm being it's almost like two things. The internal feeling, it feels like I'm being pushed out, and then the internal feeling feels like I'm being drawn in. This internal feeling is interesting because it likes to move around and hide and then come. And it's really subtle because it's not always there. Usually it's more emotions. Emotions are the things that are proliferating. But it's like that eternal sense is way better than being in emotions. I'll tell you that much. It's way better.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still something that I see, that I know is there. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because these subtleties are like the working of like, okay, so wholesome, wholesome, wholesome. That it's almost unbelievable to believe that that's all there is to it, because it's like I'm just so happy. That's the whole point. It's like is that it's so beautiful to talk, because I know that in reality, if I just keep going at it, this will, eventually figure itself out if I practice and keep sharing my doubts and things like that and my confusions.
Um, when I hear you speak like that, I can hear that you're adding an extra ingredient that's not necessary, and that ingredient is time.
Wait, I knew you were gonna say that. You're right, though. You're right. I'm sorry.
No, you're not. You don't look sorry at all.
I'm sorry. I know you're right. I know you're right. But it's like that is true. Like, and that's another thing that it's very almost instant when you wake up. Like maybe you'll be asleep, you know, you kind of drowse off, dream state.
Uh-huh.
But then at work,
But
you
that's
may
the
like,
normal way of existence.
and then you wake up, and then you're like, oh my God, what the heck? Like what
Right.
just
That is
yeah.
exactly, aha, I see you, Myra. That, and you're saying it in the words, what the heck? But it's the
And,
same wake
yeah.
up and say, what am I doing? And why
Yeah,
should
yeah.
I have to feel bad?
And that's the whole thing. And and like one thing that you've always recommended is sustaining that and not just making it a sitting thing. And
Hmm.
that's what I've been doing for longer, like especially from I think it was like 3 or 2 calls ago where you told me to sustain it and keep it on the heart and keep it in the breath. And
Hmm.
that's what I've been doing. And it
Well,
feels like,
that's a skill to be developed, but the
uh,
original skill is being able to get into that state.
and that's very and that's the easier part. I'm not gonna say I'm a master at it, but it's getting real easier. And and there are these moments where it's like almost the whole day is like that. It's weird. I'm
Hmm.
like, even moment like the sun is beautiful. Even cars, you don't care about pollution. It's it seems like everything is beautiful, almost everything. And but then it's like,
Well, beautiful and ugly is still a part of one's own internal
yeah,
sense, or the processing that we do.
let
The
me say it
object
like
is
this.
just the object. That car is just a car.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The beautiful is something that you add to it. We've known that. I mean, this is part of culture. When we say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, actually, it's not in the eye itself, it's a little bit deeper in the process.
Well, this is exactly how I like, because somebody said to me that there's no such thing as reconciliation. There's only re integrate. There's integration. You integrate. Like there's no such thing as you figure, like you reconcile things, like you go back in the past. And no, you have to integrate everything into awareness. I mean, well, I'm sorry, into that wisdom.
Mm,
And
okay.
and this is the part where like I'm telling you, like it's sustaining it. And then and then there's this simple like kind of dot, I guess you could say. It's the internal sense. Or do we just stay with that, or do we kind of now make that our object and kind of breathe into it and work into it and kind of like really kind of open it up and look at it in that sense?
There's many different ways of answering that question, and some of it has to do with the place that the student is progressing.
Because I feel like
All
I'm
right.
stuck. That's what I feel. Like I feel like I'm okay, but I feel like I want to go somewhere. I want to see, like, what do I do next? Do I just
All
keep,
right. What do
you
you
know,
do next is examine the desire
to
to
go
do
next?
something next,
Yeah.
because you're already good enough as you are, and you know that.
And this is where it's even a weirder
You're
question.
in the
It's
habit of wanting more. Yes, thank you. I really enjoyed that plate full of food. I want another, and another, and another. So
eh, yeah.
part of getting satisfied then is to be able to sustain that satisfaction, and you just gave yourself away. Oh, I've got the satisfaction and now I want more. Well, if you want more, that means that you're not satisfied. So
Hmm.
it's not real satisfaction. The real satisfaction is to recognize that you do want more, and then you can tell yourself it's okay. So let's go back and use, for this one thing, let's use the example of fear,
Hmm.
because fear is very common. When I say very common, I would say that every human being that, let us say an ordinary human being, not Dhamma dudes, or ordinary people are moving in and out of a state of fear maybe 100 or maybe 300 times a day.
Man, that's maybe I forgot. Maybe I forgot. But
All right,
it's
here's an example. You've got to go to the bathroom.
mhm.
You're sitting in that room right where you are, and you've got to go to the bathroom. Why do you got to go to the bathroom? What is that all about? Isn't there fear that you'll shit on yourself right there in your pants if you
No,
don't go to the bathroom to do it?
no, it's it's I just go, I just do it.
Pardon?
I just go, I just do it. Like my body says, I'm like, okay, the body goes, the body, just enters the restroom and boom.
All
But
right.
I'm not sure if it, maybe
Okay,
I would,
here you're
yeah,
driving the car.
there we go. Yeah.
All right, you're driving the car along and you come up to the intersection and the right light turns red and you pull your car to a stop. Why?
Well, I see. Yeah, because of the conditioning, and well, no, because there's real danger in the sense if you run that red light,
Dang
yeah.
it, you're making my point now. Okay. Now you're beginning to see that how much of our life is driven by fear. Not very big fears,
Just a
just
little.
little ones.
Yes, and you are absolutely right because this happens in my workplace with my feel my body gets kind of like if there's rush, oh boy, you kind of like have to, you know, kind of work with it, but you still kind of know that
Got to get
behind
it
this
done.
is
You got right.
yeah.
You're here at work, you're there expecting of you, and so most of what we do is out of fear.
Well, no, not all the time. It's more when something is expected of you. That's when it really happens, when it
Yeah, but where is
arises.
that expectation coming from? It doesn't come from the outside world. It's still something that we've got in our own Salayatana. We figured that out.
You
We
call it the
assume something.
the parent voice, authority voice,
That
superego.
parent, though, is in fact much of the Salayatana.
This, yeah.
Okay, and in psychology in the old days, because we were still having cassettes, in fact, that was the time when we were moving out of reel to reel into cassettes. But the idea that they would have, the psychologists would talk about playing the old tapes.
I'm sorry. I'm listening, but I'm gonna take off the headphones so I can charge it.
So we would play the old tape. What is the old tape? Here's an example of the old tape. The Dhamma dude is sitting there watching a video. He's on YouTube. And the old tape starts to play. What is the old tape? You ought to be meditating.
Yeah, the old tape, like the duty voice.
The duty voice, that's another way of talking about it. You ought to do this, you ought to do that, you need to do that thing over there. Playing those old tapes, and that the motivating is going to be either resistance or acquisition.
Okay.
If we resist those thoughts, then we in fact will kind of generally feel bad.
Hmm.
If we acquiesce to them, then we're, even while we're not getting up from the video, we're no longer enjoying the video. We can enjoy the video until the thought comes, I should meditate, or I should be meditating, or I should spend my time not watching videos. I should meditate.
And that's exactly when I notice it, and then I start to ingest wholesome thoughts, wholesome good. And then automatically you just come back to like, oh no. But it's the little things like, oh, you invited a friend over today? Like, oh, he doesn't answer? You automatically, it's but it's not even you. It's like these little movements come arising, like little by little. Like you don't even intend to. It's just like habit. Like, oh, like there's no reason to worry, but yet there's the worry. Like, oh, blah 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 blah. It's almost, and if it's not on the level of thought, it's on the level of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's and thinking is a feeling, but it's more raw. Like if it's not just in your head, it's more like in the body. I got to do something. You're moving around the house. You're pacing back and forth for no reason, and that's the lesson part. Now the part that is is the one that's really obvious is the part where it's like when you're there with it and it's really up, when it's really obvious, not just like you're in your workplace and you think it's normal, but like when you're alone long enough and it just arises, like you're so happy and boom, all of a sudden it's something arises that kind of puts you off, like something that you really don't like. For example, fear.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
A moment ago, you mentioned about wandering around the house without a reason.
Hmm.
In fact, there is a reason. If there wasn't a reason, you wouldn't be running around the house. What is the reason? The reason is restlessness.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, and what is the underlying cause of restlessness is fear.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the fear then is, let us call it nebulous in the sense that it's indistinct. And not only is the fear itself indistinct, but the solution to that fear is indistinct. That's why you're wandering around the house. You're going around looking for something to get out of that feeling. And
Hmm.
all of this is done at a kind of a subconscious level. And in fact, what we're talking about is that people have no sati. They're not waking up. They're just sitting um, in the state of, uh, let's call it instinctual behavior. It is instinctual for people who are feeling fear is to go stir crazy. We've got, I mean, cabin fever. That's it. What is cabin fever?
Yeah.
I got to get out of here. Why? Because I don't like what's going on right now. But the reality is that being snowed in a cabin in the wintertime sounds like a really marvelous thing.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like you can't. That's the thing when at a deeper level, maybe to not make us make it a little lofty in a sense. It's like you when you're there for long enough, you not there anymore, and that's what
Well,
people.
actually, let's look at it from the perspective of Anapanasati. And that is that you're wandering around the house, and then you wake up, and you wake up and say, "Oh, I'm wandering around the house for really no reason at all. But why? Oh, it's because I feel restless." Okay, and so now we can come in and we can evaluate that restless, and we can see that underlying the restlessness is fear, and then we can have wholesome thoughts like there really is nothing to fear. There are no snakes on the floor. There are no alligators in the room. The mafia don is not there stabbing me in the back. The cops are not breaking down the door. The air that I'm breathing is not poison.
And this is
Everything is okay. This is not dangerous. Allow yourself to feel that you're not in danger, that you feel safe and secure. And so we can take a deep breath and say, wow, I'm glad that I don't have to feel afraid anymore. I didn't know what I was afraid of, but I recognize right now in this moment there is nothing to fear. Wow, what a relief.
and that's the funny thing about it is when I'm practicing and I feel so satisfied, you know what I think? I think, what am I gonna ask Dhammarato? Like in the sense, like I feel like 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 this is the point. It's like if we keep doing this, eventually there'll be nothing left to
That's
feel.
why we that's why we play with and harp on the word sunyata. Sunyata.
And it's almost like
There's
because we're
nothing
all
there.
scared.
There's nothing to it.
We're all kind of like scared one day, we're gonna die one day, in the future. Like in the sense like a body will collapse and that's me. But we already feel that at subtle levels, not because of the body, but because of our mental, of our
It generally is not
yeah,
a thought that someday I will die.
yeah, yeah.
That's not what's normally going on. Very few people sitting in the church pew are thinking that someday I will die.
Yeah, no one thinks that because that's not
No, no
that's
one
not
thinks that. But the fear that someday I will die is there. In other words, we're talking about something that is nonverbal thinking. Nonverbal thinking is fear. Fear is of nonverbal thinking. It's a motivator. It gets us going, and in fact, we may start to have verbal thoughts.
and this is
And
exact
so it's possible to walk around the house, wander around the house in a state of restlessness, but you're not having very many thoughts.
and the sukha and the five factors and the practice is an assault on basically unsatisfactoriness, because like this idea that people think life is an issue, like, oh, my body and my, like, I'm born, but it's really not that. It's like, it seems to me that it's just the way that we see it, and that's the hardest thing to kind of get accustomed to, in the
Or
sense of,
perhaps the way of saying it is because we're not seeing it. You're saying seeing it in a certain way. Maybe
yeah,
the way we're seeing it is not seeing it at all.
that,
We're
yeah,
not
that's,
aware
and
of those
this,
feelings of fear. All we have at the beginning is the wake up of why am I wandering around the house
mhm.
for no reason?
And because, like, some people, like, they think that that like you've kind of like said that, oh, okay, it's not just awareness, and you have to dynamically work with awareness, I mean with consciousness, with your, with your sati, work with sati, and
Okay. To
remember,
wake up and to do the investigation. Now, that's investigation that we're talking about. I was just giving you an example of the investigation is there's no alligators here.
yeah,
Why am I feeling afraid if I, in fact, am not in danger?
yeah. I'm sorry, where is the speaker on this?
The
That's
what?
weird. It's not letting me have a speaker, because you're kind of a little bit low, so I just want to raise you up.
Oh, I don't know about your cell phone.
Let's- Okay, it's fine. There we go.
All right. I don't know.
It's okay. It's good.
Okay. So we were at the point of wandering around the house and we wake up. Why am I wandering around the house? Or we wake up and we investigate. We start asking, well, why am I wandering around the house? The answer is, oh, it's because I feel a bit afraid. Maybe the thoughts that I'm having is something in the future that needs to be done. But the point is that I'm afraid and that I'm restless. And so we can do more investigation and we can investigate. I see that fear inside and that I can deal with that fear now directly. The first thing that I can do is I can make sure that there is actually no danger.
Yeah, yeah,
Telling ourselves and investigating and seeing that things are not danger should be quite a relief because normally we're not seeing that there is no danger. We're just experiencing the feeling of fear as if there were danger. Like I said, false positive.
yeah, yeah,
Now you can think of it like this 600,000 years ago, whatever humans were at that time, something maybe in between, all of that fear was because we were in a really, really dangerous environment. One of the things that humans have done over the many, many millennia is they built a society, and they did this building that society because they were afraid of all of the chaos. That Darwin is right. It's a dog eat dog world. Alligators eat alligators, etc., like that. It's a dangerous world. And we grew up as a species with mechanisms to keep us alive in that dangerous world. It's called the self preservation instinct, and its method of communication is the chemical systems in the body that we associate with fear. Adrenaline, cortisol, we stop breathing, we freeze, we do all kinds of things when this fear mechanism is there, but we're generally not aware of it. It's a subtle kind of fear, but we can wake up to it. A way of thinking of is this Freud and the psychologist and the psychiatrist talk about things that are unconscious, subconscious, and conscious, right? You've heard
mm,
the word subconscious. Basically, what we can say is that subconscious means that we're just not paying attention. We're not wisely observing. We're not attentive to what's going on. That's our subconscious. You could actually um, have the house on fire, but you don't know it. But then you smell smoke. But you're not really paying attention to the smoke smell because you're not trained to smell smoke. However, if you've been an electrical engineer who has been around a lot of electrical fires and you know what it is like, what a transformer smells like when it's getting hot, then you become quite attentive to the smells that have to do with fire. And so that person, when they smell smoke, they're immediately going to say, "I smell smoke. What is it?" But the one who is not paying attention will smell the smoke and then subconsciously have fear without knowing what it is. So the whole point of Anapanasati is to start waking up to what's going on, or another way of saying it is there is no such thing as a subconscious. What is really going on is we're not
Yes,
waking up to our senses.
mm,
That the senses are giving the input and we're ignoring that input.
mm,
Generally, the input is ignored because we have a favorite form of input device.
mm.
And we use that to the exclusion of all of the others. What is that favorite input device that we have? The favorite input device that we have is thinking, that we spin on inside the mind. We're not actually processing that smoke that's coming in to the odors of the nose. We're not thinking about it. We're not processing that data. Why? Because we're busily processing the data that we like to process.
Yeah, it's funny because it's all about the preferences.
hmm
Like,
So
and
the
that's, mm,
sati is basically then the process of waking up into our senses, which is another way of waking up to the here now. How do we experience the here now is with the senses. How do we experience the past is with the mental process. How do we experience the future is by creating it as a mental process. But how we live our lives happily is by being in the present moment in our senses. To come out of the mind into reality. This is why the Buddha called himself Tathagata, the one who has come to thusness or thisness. That's what Tathagata, actually the Pali word is tatata, which actually means this is it. Now we have a much more sophisticated way of with English now from other teachers or other traditions. One would be Ram Dass has the name of the book, "Be Here Now." And that means something. To be here now. What does that mean? To be in your senses, to take sensory input, to look at the fact around the house there are no alligators on the floor, there are no snakes, there's no mafia. This is a safe place. Allow yourself to feel safe.
and what about when there is an alligator? To play devil's advocate, I guess.
Uh
Because that's the whole thing. It's like,
why are you around alligators? If you see
well,
them from a distance, why do you go near them?
well, in a sense, what I mean is that eventually, because really, I feel like what people
If there
fear.
are alligators, this is a time for real fear. There is a real alligator, real fear.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So like,
This is not
it's
a
it's
false positive. There's a real alligator coming.
it's like, let's just say, like, for example, the Buddha was very brave, right? He was fearless. He was very fearless.
Fearless, not brave.
Yeah, and but in a sense,
Bravery is fear plus stupidity.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
bravery.
exactly. And the story about the I think it was Angulimala,
Angulimala, yes, I know the story well.
and
Sutta
just
number 86.
let's just say the story like just as it in the sense of a short story in the sense like, okay, he was a killer, and the Buddha was, not, and he was there, and he could help people like that. Most of us would cringe at the fact that somebody like that would be around us. We would run immediately. We would fear. We would kind of fear for our life because we have a body. This is my body. I must protect my beating heart, my organs functioning.
In the beginning of the sutta, actually, there was reason for the Buddha to be afraid because, in fact, Angulimala was chasing him.
That's what I'm saying. But there's the magic. I don't know if there's two sides, two versions. There's the story with the psychic powers, and I don't know if there's another story with no psychic powers, but or no cities. There's one with cities, and I think there's another one with no cities. And I know cities is like a whole nother thing, and let's just forget about that word. But yeah.
Well, you could imagine at the non-magical level
Mm-hmm.
that Angulimala got that name, by the way, I don't really remember what his actual name was. And there's a story behind that as to why he was out doing that stuff.
Okay.
And why he was out doing that stuff was because he was Brahmin with a Brahmin teacher, and he had lust for the Brahmin teacher's daughter.
Oh.
And the Brahmin, his teacher, says, okay, you can have my daughter, but you have to bring me the fingers, one finger from each dead body, and you have to bring me 1,000 of them. And when you bring me 1,000 fingers from dead corpses, you can have my daughter.
Oh my gosh. Oh, from corpses?
No, well, it didn't really matter where he got the finger.
Well, I'm just saying because there are some that would make sense.
But the easy way, I guess, he thought was to go kill somebody. And in fact, the
Yeah.
idea was is that uh, he already had almost all he needed, and he only needed one more,
Yeah.
and that was the Buddha.
Yeah, like his last kind of like desire in the sense.
Okay, so yeah, that's significant. Now, one more point, and that is that if in fact the way that many people think that he was terrorizing the community, the whole surrounding part. In fact, we know that because King Pasenadi had army troops out looking for him.
Hmm.
In
Yeah.
fact, King Pasenadi himself was out looking for this dude. So that means that the whole community was all upset. And Angulimala knew that too, which means that he would expect people to be afraid of him.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he's a killer. That's who
Okay,
he is.
right. But the Buddha was not afraid of him,
Yeah.
but the Buddha was able to, let us say, hide from him or to confuse him so that Angulimala couldn't catch the Buddha or he didn't know where he was. And so he called out, "Stop, monk." And the Buddha responded, "I have stopped. You stop too. You stop what you're doing." Okay, and so he gave him that command, and that was almost like a wake up. It was a wake up. He woke him up. I have stopped. You stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that and because of the background, I mean, this guy was not a thug or a hoodlum or someone who was who had been uh, trained to kill. No, he was actually a Brahmin priest who had gotten confused about because of his lust for the daughter of the Brahmin, and so instead of recognizing that, hey, his teacher just said no, you can't have her,
Yeah. Yeah. He didn't mean it.
and so I imagine that Angulimala had already kind of figured out that this is not the right thing to be doing, and so when this famous monk, the Buddha, told him to stop, that sort of was all it took to open that door. That was sati, awareness. Wake up. Stop what you're doing. Okay. A later part of the story, there's several different things that happened in there. One of them is that after Angulimala changed his robe and became one of the bhikkhus, then we find King Pasenadi with his troops out looking for Angulimala.
Mm-hmm.
And King Pasenadi came up to the Buddha because they were really good friends. If just the raw cops had showed up and found a bunch of monks out in the woods, that was not the scene. Oh no, King Pasenadi knew the Buddha. He was a
Yeah.
student of the Buddha. There are a number of sutras that mention King Pasenadi. So when King Pasenadi came and asked the Buddha, "Have you seen Angulimala?" You can imagine that the Buddha looked around and looked directly at Angulimala, maybe even pointed to him. And then he asked King Pasenadi, "Do you see Angulimala here?"
Wow.
Well,
Okay.
Angulimala, what he did see was maybe a new monk.
Yeah. No.
And
And even that sense, it's like it's almost a story about like the Buddha's teachings in general.
mm,
It is a story about his teaching. It's not just a story just for story's
right,
sake.
it's a marvelous story. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I've never looked at it. I mean, I've never even kind of recognized that.
Okay,
And
so really what the Buddha is teaching here is one of his primary teachings. And that is that the Dhamma is for rehabilitation. It is not for punishment.
yeah,
That normally when you find moral judgments, that means that, oh, I'm good and you're bad, and we just leave it like that. An example of that would be the prison systems in the United States. The prison systems are designed to warehouse and to punish. They are not designed for rehabilitation. But everything about the Sangha is designed around rehabilitation, including at the Patimokkha with the confession, including that. Here's an example of that. If a monk, a young monk, misbehaves, and the other monks know it, they will not tell the family of that new monk about his misbehaving. Why is that? Because the family will feel, especially the mom, like that this kid has failed us, that he's not living up, that we've lost face, and they'll go grab him and pull him out of the wat.
yeah.
But the monks want to give the guy a chance for rehabilitation. Who knows, 6 months from now, he might be an arahat if we
Yeah,
give him a chance.
yeah.
But you see, in the West, we have the idea of, oh, you've done bad, you've broken a law, it's time for you to be punished, and we don't care if you get rehabilitated or not. We just want to put you away for enough years so that we don't have to deal with you until when
Sounds
you
like
get out. But when you do get out, we expect you to be bad because we didn't bother to rehabilitate you.
yeah, like a soul, like forever. You're forever bad. The bad soul.
Right. When you're bad one time, that means you're forever bad. There's that time.
Yeah.
Time is in it now. Okay. Rehabilitation is, can we make a change?
Mhm.
So the story of Angulimala, the way that the Patimokkha is set up, the way that the entire Sangha is set up, as well as in many suttas, that's the whole point. That you, in fact, if I can say it like this, need to rehabilitate yourself and stop punishing yourself.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's what the superego is. That's what the critical parent inside each one of our minds is doing is that we're criticizing ourselves rather than rehabilitating ourselves. And the rehabilitation is never mind what you did wrong in the past, be good right now.
And that's where like it's funny because like I know what to do, and that's always, since that day of you were like, that's confusion, not like neutralness. It was very clear to me, like the vision thing. the
Hmm.
vision of the
That's a
whole.
good point. That's good awareness. Congratulations for figuring out that. That many times a state of confusion will bring us down to a dull state, and we think that that's kind of a neutrality, or um, in fact, we can get um, confused with opaca by using the word equanimity. Because
Oh,
opaca does not mean equanimity, it does not mean dull confusion. That possibly the better way of looking at it is sea legs.
yeah.
This is actually quite an interesting teaching. Upeka means that you can manage the turbulence of life around you without losing your balance or falling over. And so I use the analogy of the sea legs. Imagine that you've got a sea captain of a fairly large fishing boat, one that goes out to sea, a big one, but not so big as like an aircraft carrier or a huge floating hotel like they have with cruises, but just a ship, a fishing vessel, a big one, and that it's turbulent. When you're on, um, when the boat is docked in the harbor, the deck is flat and solid, and you can walk on it. Any landlubber can get on that boat and walk all over the boat and have no trouble. But when that boat goes out to sea, which is the natural environment of that sea, that means now you have to have sea legs. I'll stop and make an analogy. Think of it like this, that that ship that's being in harbor is like our sitting meditation, to where we get the feel of the ship before we take it out to sea. Because once we go out to sea, there's going to be a lot of stuff happening. It's called waves, it's called turbulence. Okay. So now look at the sea captain. The sea captain has known this boat. He's got on it and probably was raised on it. And he has what we call sea legs, which means that he can go from the bow of the ship all the way to the stern and not have any events at all.
Man, that's amazing. I mean, that's hard. In those ships, that's really difficult.
Okay, as opposed to a landlubber is on that same ship. Perhaps they're sitting at the bow together, and the sea captain goes to the stern. Now the landlubber wants to go there too. He's not going to be able to get to the end of the other side of that ship without having a whole lot of events,
Yeah.
like banging into the wall of the cabin or having to grab the ropes to hang on. He may have to heave over the side. He may go over the side. There's all kinds of things that can happen if you don't have your sea legs.
Hmm.
Okay. So this is what we then mean by upeka, which is basically also back into the idea of rehabilitation, that we learn to walk or we learn to manipulate without having an event.
Yeah.
So this way, a way of saying it, then that sea captain with his sea legs can go from one end of that ship to the other with, without an event, which means he's got nothing.
Yeah. It's
But the
just.
landlubber can't get to the other end of the ship without having one event after another. Maybe every step he takes, he's got to re-steady himself.
Yeah. And that's I guess that's like the, because like again, like the whole confusion thing. Um, it
Mm-hmm.
was very, like, when that day it was like very clear, like boom, it was like a magic. I don't know, it was weird. It was like you were like that Buddha when he said stop. That's what it
Mm-hmm.
felt like. Like I felt like, wow, he's right.
It's a wake up.
I should just stop wasting my time being like unwholesome. I should why like it was just very clear. Like I didn't know the name for it until you mentioned it, but it was like the knowledge and vision of unwholesome and wholesome. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was the clear, because I never understood that, because I always thought that it's like not I'm sorry, a behavior etiquette, ethic, something to duty, do something to control, or some some other thing just to do. But then now it's like, it's funny because now I see where where it's like, oh my God, it's like some things that we think are so important are just those hindrances. They're not spiritual in the sense of like, oh, this is getting me somewhere. Like, no, it's really just like that's a lot of what I learned from you in the sense of like a lot of the things that we thought were getting us places weren't. Like in that sense, they were just hindrances, which is exactly what they do. They
Hmm.
think that, you think you're them. That's what you think you are.
Right. But if you understand it this way now, you can understand why it's so important, this first noble truth. This is dukkha.
Yeah,
Because many people will be confused. They think that what they're doing is wholesome, when in fact it's suffering.
yeah,
Going back to the example of wandering around the house, people don't recognize that that's suffering.
yeah. And I
That's
think
dukkha.
it's like it's the feeling again. It's that feeling of eternal. I like, oh, not again. I'm always like, it's like that. Uh, I don't know if it's just Westerners. There has to be more people because, but it's mostly like Westerners that deal with that sense of like they're always trying to get somewhere in that sense of like spiritual. Like I have a feeling that must be important. I have this feeling that must be important. I have this thought that must like I used to be like that in the sense of like, oh wow, yeah,
Right,
yeah,
exactly so. In fact, you're actually following along right with what we were thinking about in the sense that we as children in Western society are um, taught and treated as if we were important.
yeah.
Every child is important. No child left behind. That whole mentality, okay? And every child is important. So when we start to grow up, we begin, because we've gotten into the habit of important, we begin to look for important. We look for events to think that the event is important. An example would be an important event in your meditation, or an important past life experience, or in the other world, graduating from high school is important. Getting the degree from the university, that's an important event.
So then
But
why?
but a college education is what they're looking at, not the event of the graduation nor the degree itself. The
Yeah,
degree is how we get, that's the Western mentality. And what we forget is, no, this actually is now 16 years of education.
yeah,
Okay, 16 years of process. Another example of that, the child goes to the recital and plays his piano piece correctly. And everyone in that place sees that as an event. Only the old teacher knows how much that student had to struggle with that piece of music. So, this recital is actually the culmination of a long process. It's not an event. But we in the West, we're very event oriented.
yeah.
And
Like
so,
I was born. That's me. It's I
mhm.
am important. I have a purpose. This is me.
And so when they bring this idea of importance to Buddhism, then they begin to look at attainments. They look for labels, milestones,
Yeah,
um, indications, diplomas.
and
And so
yeah,
they hear all of these words like sotapan and arahant and all of that kind of stuff.
it's a joke because there's a joke. Jesus would be like, "You wicked generation," like in the King James, who look for signs and wonders. Like,
Oh,
like Jesus would call like the generation like dumb in his time because they would look for signs and wonders all the time. They would look for signs
mhm.
and
We
miracles.
haven't stopped, have we?
No, no, it's a natural. It seems a condition. We're conditioned to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So going back to that, then, how can we come out of that landlubber who has to go from one event to the next, looking for one thing after another along his life? And how can we become the sea captain with our sea legs so we can go through our life and not have any events at all? Have there's nothing, nothing's happened.
Which sounds like automatically kind of like grace in this, in the metaphorical poetic sense, where it's like you don't have to go through all these spiritual climaxes. Like you don't have to like go through a dark, you know, night or a shadow work, or have to like go ascetically fast and everything like that. Because
Right.
I went through all that because like I was a Christian and I had like blissful experiences. I was a Hindu, I had blissful. I took acid. But all of that stuff is like I it never did until that day that you told me. That's confusion. I never, it's like I just roamed around the universe, kind of like trying to find
Look,
a
finding events. Exactly.
yeah, like something that was gonna give me the and see, as even now as you tell me, uh,
But that point in time when that whatever it is gives you, that's the event.
exactly like the difference between all of the things that are the events in my life. When I learned from you is like there is no. It's more like just like a wind carrying you instead of like a bumper car. You know, whoa whoa whoa. You know,
Uh-huh.
rushing or going around doing this. And I guess that's like because one metaphor I it's like you kind of have like the Zen stick when you talk about the wholesome and the unwholesome, because it seems like in the sense like my mind tries to go this way and then you're like nope, come over here, and then it's like boom. And it's funny because like when you
Okay.
just when you just talk, like that's how I experience it, because like when I listen, like I'm really trying to listen there, when you mention emptiness, it's like, oh my God, yeah, it's just you're doing the same thing, man. He's telling you the same, you know, do it, relax, calm. It's like that. It's like always. It's getting more and more ingrained in the sense of like there's this,
Precisely so. That's what
yeah,
we're doing is that we're adding new fonts to the old database.
and there's this story like of a Zen monk where he's like he couldn't handle no one paying attention to him because he kept having meditation experiences. And he kept trying to tell people, but they kept like putting him off because they knew that he was trying to tell them, and they purposely like would give him a broom or would like do something, and he would like lose it like internally. He would like he's like no one, like he would lose. It was so funny, and it's just similar to what a lot of us do, like when it comes to practice, like Dhammarato, I'm enlightened, you know, or like, you know, or something like that, like where it's like really trying to figure it out, like in that
Mhm.
sense. And even kind of like,
Precisely so.
yeah,
And while we're trying to figure it out, basically that's spinning in the mind, and that the actual way of thinking of it, or the way that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa pointed out, is no, look at what you're doing, look at what's going on. You don't have to figure anything out. What you need is more input.
yeah, yeah, wake
But
up,
figuring it out means I've got all the input I need. Now I need to process it.
yeah, yeah, like
And
as
so
if
we
it is
keep processing and keep processing and keep processing, but we're missing some data. It's
yeah.
not in the Sankara and it's not in our input. But now we're beginning to open up and getting new input, and that new input today becomes tomorrow's Sankara.
It's so interesting. Yeah,
And by
it's
having more and more and more wholesome moments to pile on to our old pile of moments in the Sankara, means that now when we draw out of that database, the stuff on the top of the pile is now wholesome. Therefore, our processing will be more wholesome, and our salayatana, our consciousness, will be more wholesome because we're spending time creating more wholesome and having that layer on.
it, and it's almost like counterintuitive because it's like when you're in that state, it doesn't feel like you're doing it.
No,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
there is that layering on quality of, um, let us say it this way: who is more likely to be happy at 2 p.m., the guy at 1:59 who is happy, or if the guy at minute 1:59 is miserable? Who is more likely at 2 o'clock to be happy?
Neither.
The guy who is happy at 1:59 or the guy who is miserable at 1:59? Who is the one who's the most likely to be happy?
Neither. None.
Why do you say that?
Because they're both in time.
Yes, but one is actually practicing unwholesome,
I was
and
gonna say that, but
therefore
I
he
thought you
is
were trying
most
to trick
likely
me.
to continue to practice unwholesome. And the
Mhm,
guy who is practicing wholesome is more than likely going to continue practicing wholesome.
mhm. I
This
thought
is
you were
why we
asking me
talk
to.
about it as a skill.
I thought you were asking me a trick question.
All right. Well, you tricked yourself, not me.
I know, right?
Okay. So, this is the idea. Another example of that would be you have three guys standing on the street corner, each one of them holding a violin and a bow. Which one is most likely to put the violin to his chin and start bowing that instrument, making music? The one who has been carrying a violin for 15 years, or the guys who just saw the violin for the first time and picked it up?
The second guy. Wait,
The
well,
g-
I feel like
the-
I don't know. That's hard question. I play instruments, and after a while, you kind of like you
Okay,
feel.
so the guy who plays an instrument
Yeah.
is the guy who's most likely to pick up an instrument and play it. The
Hmm.
guy who does not play an instrument has never played an instrument. The likelihood of him picking up an instrument and playing it is not high.
No.
Okay, now let's talk about the people who are working at the factory are now on break. They've got a 15-minute break at 10 o'clock. That's just how the factory operates. And five guys come out and stand in the parking lot. Which one of them is most likely to light up a cigarette? The guy who has cigarettes with him or the guys who don't?
No. The first guy.
All right, the guy who's got the cigarettes is the one who most likely. Why is he likely to have cigarettes with him? Is because he's already in the habit of smoking.
Hmm.
If you're not in the habit of smoking, then you're not likely to smoke. This is the reason that the Buddha is talking about sankara. It's all of the old stored stuff. It's our habit patterns, it's our habit systems, and that we need to intentionally make some changes to those habits so that the old unwholesome habits die out and the new habits are cultivated. And when we have those new habits cultivated, then they're the ones who are going to more likely influence this moment.
Yeah, and that's how it's felt,
And
and it.
so, if you spend 15 years in unwholesome, the next moment is likely to be unwholesome. But if you spent 14 years unwholesome and then now the last year you spent practicing Dhamma and practicing the wholesome, in this next minute, which is more likely to be wholesome? The guy who has been practicing wholesome for a new period of time or the one who has never been practicing wholesome at all? He's
Mhm.
not going to start immediately practicing wholesome just at this point in time, but the guy who has been doing it. So this is the point about building up skills. This is why the word a skill to be developed or training. This is actually what we mean when we use in English language the word practice. That's what practice is practicing the wholesome
Do
so
you
that
think?
the wholesome.
And this is the focus. This is the focus till the end of the practice, right?
There's no focus act. There's no point to it.
That's what I'm saying. Like there is, yeah, like in the sense of
the
because
the
the
the point is right now, in fact, if you want to think about it, if you are in a wholesome state, then the next state is more likely to be wholesome than if you're in an unwholesome state now. If you're in an
yeah,
unwholesome state now, the next mind moment is most more likely going to be unwholesome. But if this moment is wholesome, then the next moment is likely to be more wholesome.
Yeah, and that's where I feel like sometimes, like at first, when I first started with you, the confusion was that sounds like positive thinking only. And in the sense, which is
Okay, I will agree. It is, except that it's not the same as affirmations.
exactly, and that's what the difference is.
Affirmations are trying to talk yourself into something you don't have. So
Yeah,
the young kid, the teenage girl that stands in the mirror or in the bathroom looking in the mirror and telling herself, "You're a wonderful person, you're smart, you've got everything that you need, you're beautiful," and she doesn't believe any of that stuff. So that affirmation is not going to do her any good because she knows that it's a lie.
yeah, that's the whole thing. You know that,
Hmm.
and that's like the whole. It's like the subtlety of it is it's funny. It's almost so obvious that it's subtle at the same time.
Yeah.
It's
All right. So, what we're talking about, gladdening the mind, is nothing like affirmations.
no,
Gladdening the mind is saying, I can be happy right now. You see, the affirmations that the girl in the mirror is doing, she actually, what she's thinking about is what it's going to be like at school the rest of the day.
yeah,
If I could tell myself I'm beautiful now, then the rest of the day I'll feel beautiful. No, because you don't actually feel beautiful now. You're just telling yourself you ought to.
yeah,
So you're giving yourself a test and you're failing the test and you walk out of the bathroom a failure, but at least you told yourself a lie. I feel good. All right. So Anapanasati is completely different than that. We actually want to get into the state of acceptance or the feeling that I am, in fact, beautiful. What does it feel like to feel like I have a beautiful mind, that I feel comfortable and secure and happy? Once I develop that, now I continue to do it and develop it as a skill so that it's no longer an affirmation that I don't meet up to, but it's confidence that I, in fact, can do it.
and well, yeah, confidence exactly. And I'm more like of a poetic person, so I like to use the word grace because it's really graceful the way you act after you have that knowledge. In the sense you know that, and the grace comes in the sense of like a gracefulness in your way in your life, in the way you live your
Okay.
life.
We have another word for that
What is it?
that we use, noble.
Oh, yeah, I like that too. I've heard it. You've used it, but I've
Hmm.
never kind of put it together with the grace.
Right. What does a noble person do? Well, one of the things, let's look at it this way. Let's imagine that two people approaching a scene from two different ways. This guy's from the east coming west, the other guy's from the west coming east, and they meet together at a place to where two other men are having a fight. They're having a brawl. One of the guys who has approached this fight or the brawl is noble, and the other one is not. Who's the one who's most likely to going to get into the fight with the other two guys?
Well, not the noble.
Not the noble.
Yeah.
No, the noble is not going to get into the fight. The one who is filled with grace is to try to separate them.
Well, oh no. I would use the word righteousness because in the sense like what I mean by grace is more of like a ease.
Precisely. So the noble is at ease, but the guy who is not graceful, not noble, he gets upset when these
Right.
two guys are fighting.
Hmm.
He
Righteous.
want he wants to separate them, or and in fact, if you get into if you come to the place where two guys are actually fighting and you try to separate them, guess what? You're going to get hit.
Yeah.
Right. Not very graceful, is it?
Mm-mm. No.
Okay. So this quality then of graceful, or this quality of noble, is basically not getting involved.
Yeah,
So now we can go back to the going down the ship, and the sea captain, the one who has sea legs, is noble. He can walk by the fight and
uh,
doesn't have to get involved with it. But the
yeah,
landlubber, he's going to have to go bang into that wall. He's going to go get hit. He thinks, oh, you guys should not be fighting. And so
yeah.
he joins the fight to try to stop it.
Well, that brings about a lot of, again, like it brings a lot of intensity in your life when you start to practice more, like in the sense of you're really free and alive, in the sense of
But it
like,
doesn't bring intensity, does it? Because intensity is, in fact, what the person who is trying to stop the fight.
well,
He's the
no,
one who gets intense.
I
The
mean like,
noble is not intense.
I mean like when I say like in relationship to just like before I didn't feel like life was alive. It was more numb, more kind of not rich. There was nothing to live for in the sense. There was nothing to enjoy in that sense. My
There
like
really is nothing to live for. Isn't that marvelous? That means that I can live without having to have a cause or a
so
purpose. I can enjoy the heck out of my life. I
so
don't
that
have a
was
job to do.
and that was the and that's the point exactly. You realize that is that no oh it's like no wait, I'm not wrong. People kept telling me I was wrong, and I was actually, in a sense we all feel that way at some point. I feel
Hmm.
some all of us get a glimpse of it, in the sense of like as you get older and you see that, oh wait, kids, look at kids, perfect example. Kids are,
Hmm.
and sometimes are like that, where it's like, oh, let's just get out of here and just have fun and enjoy the day and not get so caught up in the stuff. And that's that's funny because I guess it's almost like I would ask then, what it's like, why is there so much stuff in Buddhism then, if it's just so if you can get Buddhism and just get the Four Noble Truths, Paticca Samuppada, seven factors of awakening, five hindrances, and that's it, almost. Like that's all you need in the sense. Like you don't really need anything else. So
Okay.
what's the point of the immaterial jhanas? And then there's like, cause is that the trap? Cause like I feel like
It is
it's
for the Westerners
right. Like cause I
because
feel
they want those events. They want those status symbols. They want that red badge of courage.
because
They
because for
want
the
to
what?
show off.
Yeah, exactly. That's really it. Like it's really it because it's pay attention because this is me. I'm finally achieving what I've always wanted.
Hmm.
And that's the whole opposite of like not really the whole thing. It's kind of, I'm sorry to keep saying it, it's like because it flips it over. It really does flip it over. Like everything is upside down. It really doesn't correlate with what I've learned at growing up as a child. It doesn't. It really doesn't.
They say that in the suttas. Actually, many suttas end with a little phrase that basically says, "Thank you, Gautama Buddha. You have set right that which was overturned."
Wow. Well, I say that to you.
Right. So the problem is actually that everything is upside down,
Yeah, it really, yeah.
and that we learn to turn things right side up. An example of that is a bucket.
Hmm.
The bucket, when it is what we call right side up, is because we want to carry a bunch of stuff in it.
Yeah, I
But if you
see.
turn the bucket upside down, now you can sit on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, which is the correct and more proper use of a bucket?
Yeah. Pretty obvious.
And so things are, in fact, upside down. And so what we're doing is by setting it right. The ordinary mind thinks things are upside down because they are, in fact, upside down from what is normal or what they are used to or what their sankaras. So all of the sankaras are upside down, which means they all point downwards, which means they're all wholesome, unwholesome. But if we start practicing wholesome, then that means that we're pointing up. So the likelihood of tomorrow, when tomorrow's come and we have to figure something out, we have to perceive something. If the recent sankaras are wholesome, then we may in fact have a wholesome result. But if our sankaras that we've been storing are all unwholesome, then when we do the perception, then we're likely to come up with unwholesome stuff. So we're talking about now back to that OCR software of do we have the right fonts to actually determine what's really there?
This is yeah, this is really, it's fascinating because this is actually the first step in old Vedic culture of an adept. He would learn first, he would be introduced to a pure thought. A pure
A,
thought.
a pure thought,
A
okay?
wholesome a wholesome
A
thought.
wholesome thought. Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's interesting because it really does feel like there is a weight to that message in the sense that it really does change you. Like
Mm-hmm.
it it's almost like, because it's like that, there's a story about a monk that he, I mean, you're pretty sure you know, where he runs in the forest saying what joy, like in bliss, he's like, I'm free at last. And somebody asked him, or like, I forgot what was the question, but he was a Buddhist monk, and
Uh-huh.
he was like so overjoyed with bliss because he just knew that nothing could ever turn him back again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like this, it's not like I don't know why you would even like, it's just, it almost feels like like I have nothing to say. It feels like I have nothing to, the what?
I'm go ahead. Anyway, I'm listening.
It just felt like I like, the more I understand you, the more I almost have nothing to say, you know? Like that's the
Duh.
part. Yeah, I know. I know, but it's like it's almost like that, not like, it's just very I don't know. It's just very, it's very like, um it's very real. Like it's very, it hits
Uh,
you. It hits the heart
all
in a
right.
sense. Yeah.
So let's go back to that sea captain.
Yes.
Once he gets to the back of the ship, he's really got nothing to say about his journey from the front of the ship to the back of the ship. Well, I mean, I was there, and now I'm here, and but the landlubber, boy, does he have a bunch of stories to tell. I
Yeah.
banged my head into the wall. I barfed over the side. I slipped on my own barf because it wasn't all over the slide.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so he winds up with all of these stories about all the events that he has had, to where if we have really good balance or equanimity, then we wind up not having much events. Things are not eventful
Yeah. Everything is
because
like,
all of those events were something that we manufactured within our minds anyway.
but then like, what is a mind experiencing when it's like that all the time?
Basically, in that regard, it's experiencing bad feelings.
No, no, I'm sorry. No, I mean like enlightened mind. I mean like a mind that's always wholesome, always aware, always awake, never stops, unremitting, completely in the seven factors. Like, are
It
they just
depends
like,
upon it depends on this one thing, and that is he taking an object or not?
oh, okay.
Okay. In other words, you can just look and gaze, and then everything is green. There's like millions of different shades of green just
I
by
loved it.
looking around.
Yeah.
Or I can take an object and look and see actually the truck. I can see the truck and look at the truck and take the truck as an object, but I don't have to. I can just look out and just gaze and not take an object.
It's unbelievable though, because you're basically saying like earlier, because when I look at nature, I love nature, and it's almost unbearable to look because it's so beautiful in that sense. Like it's just beautiful. But you're saying that all of that beauty is within the perception.
It's in perception, exactly. You're creating the beauty.
That's intense. Then that's very powerful. Like because nature is like almost seems like automatically beautiful, like nature itself in a sense.
No, you see nature and you see it as automatically beautiful. Another man can see that same nature and he will to cut it down and make some money off of it.
I'm sorry. Yeah. That see, that's where you got me. Like that's where I'm like, "Ugh." That really as a kid too, like that really messed with me. Like seeing that, like people destroy like even, you know, that's like a little thing that's like a little bit like I'm that's something that I work on, like having to deal with that reality that that's what's happening to this place. But yeah,
That's when we begin to then develop really noble right view, is to recognize that there are all of these different viewpoints,
yeah,
and that I learn eventually to not take any of them.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's a
That the
person
world is not beautiful; it just is.
I know
And
what
therefore I can do with it what I want. And so if I choose for it to be beautiful, and hot dog, there it is, all beautiful and everything.
how far can that go?
It, it's your mind. How far do you want to take it?
Well, but what about like what about the creation? Oh well, let me not say the creation. Let me just say the universe, because that's a really Western term. But like the universe in the sense of the physical
Let's
world.
use the world. Let's use the word environment, because the universe that we're talking about, that you have, let us say, some interaction with, is not the universe on Saturn, or the universe that's out in Andromeda, or the universe that's at the edge of the galaxy. No, the universe you live in is right here in front of you, the environment that you're in, the wind on your face, the touch of the cloth on your skin, um, the wall drawings, the room that you're in. This is the environment that you're in, and that environment is neutral, is how you feel about it. That someone can walk into the room you're in and see it as a very dangerous place, and another one can walk in and say it is a very safe place.
But there's no, but you don't, so you didn't mean that by like actually creating physical things. Like you meant it by like the feeling, the consciousness. You meant like by that internal experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
It's what we do is what we get.
Okay. Still,
It's
that's
not
pretty
what we
amazing.
get. It's just is what we do is what we get, and
Well,
that happens almost instantly. We
yeah.
see something and we don't like it. That's a very fast change in the mind.
Yeah, it seems like the more I practice, it will give it gets faster. Like, or I like how you say it. It's like everything is really fast, so we kind of slow it down. Like,
Another way would say is that the world is just operating at the speed that it operates. Is actually operating at a speed that is called causality in physics. They're getting into understanding, and they started it from the concept of why is the speed of light the speed of light, and why, even though there are let us say consistencies in what we call the speed of light, there is still variation. An example of that is looking at a pencil that's in a glass of water, and you can see that there's a curve change, or that, or when you learn to go spear fishing, you cannot throw that spear where you see the fish. You got to throw that spear where it appears beside the fish.
oh, okay,
Why
yeah,
is that? Because the change of light speed in water is different from light speed in the air. That light goes much slower in water. That's why things are distorted, especially when you're looking into water. You don't see what's in there because it's not. See, we have the perception that if I'm here and that's there, is because the light's going at the same speed. But if from this point down to here it's going at a different speed, that means that we don't see from here to there. What we're actually looking at is over there. But the perception of the speed of light. Now let's get back to the point that causality means that something is happening very fast. So fast that even the computers that we have or the cameras that do 1 billion frames a second down to that level is still so slow that we cannot detect causality. That we can, in fact, there's a YouTube that has a camera that is running at that speed, and that they turn the camera on, and then they shoot us a beam of light from a laser into a Coke bottle. And you can see over the period of time the line hitting the Coke bottle, and all of that. Now we say, well, wait a minute. How could I have even seen this Coke bottle before we turned the laser light on? The answer is because there was already ambient light in the room. But when we turned that light on, we could see the actual progression of the movement of that beam of light striking the Coke bottle and then become dispersed and all. It's actually quite an amazing thing to recognize. But one thing that they can't do is they cannot get a photo of all of the photons one at a time wiggling through the waves. That all we can see is the whole beam of light as it progresses through, but there are millions and billions of things happening inside that frame, inside that beam of light as it's coming through space.
Wow. That's incredible. And in Buddhism, there is a word for that, right? There's a difference between paticca samuppada and then causality.
Yes, that is Itya Papajayata. It's a long word.
Ithya papajayata.
Yata. Uh-huh. Itya Papajayata is actually a description in Pali of the cause and effect. With this, there is that. Without this, there is not that. And there, with this, there is that is a very short period of time.
Wow.
Okay, so getting back to your question, now that we know that the world is operating at an incredible frequency, at an incredible speed, we also understand that the Buddha said it this way, that the mind, O monks, is fast. The mind is so fast that he doesn't even have an analogy for it.
He's just
Okay,
fast.
it's fast. Here's an example of that. Think about the planet Saturn with its rings. Okay, and now think about the moon. All right, you did that in your mind. If you actually were using light, Saturn is what, 90 minutes of time at the speed of light from the Saturn to the moon. And yet you were able to do it instantly. All I had to do is mention it, and there you were. You moved from Saturn to the moon.
Yeah.
How about a rocket ship moving from Saturn to the moon? That's going to be really slow. But even the speed of light is pretty slow compared to the mind.
Because the mind can
Can
like it can
can
kind
jump.
yeah,
It can jump
perceive.
across time. That there is no time in the mind.
Mm. I can see what you're saying but it's
Okay.
ultimately very difficult. Um,
All right. So
like
let's
causality.
look at it from this perspective then, is that even now we understand that the mind is in fact fast enough to do the job. But what is not fast is our change of perception until we develop the skills. That's in fact what Anapanasati is doing, is it's developing the skill of waking up and looking at what's going on. And the question is, how fast can you wake up? How fast can you look? If something happens and it takes only 1 second, but it takes you 1 minute to look, then you're not going to see what happens. That's the issue with the camera that's running at 1 billion frames a second is still not fast enough to see causality, but it certainly is fast enough to see a beam of light moving.
That's funny because if you're, let's say, for an arhat or a Buddha or the Buddha, um,
Fast dudes.
yeah, like incredible because they basically were able to, because for a human, that would feel like time stopped.
Yeah, there's no time. It doesn't. it's
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
there is only the now. There is only one time.
Because I've had
That
that
the past
experience.
is a delusion. The future is a delusion. All we have is this present moment, and we have been having this present moment since before the formation of the earth. And way after time when you die, there will still be this present moment. This, the,
Yeah.
the current moment. Time doesn't move. It gives the delusion of movement, just like we have the delusion of self. So, as far as Paticca Samuppada goes, we normally teach it in forward order for understanding cause, effect, cause, effect, cause, effect. All right? But how we practice it is in reverse order. Why do we practice it in reverse order? Is because we normally don't wake up until we're in suffering. But if
Yeah.
we begin to wake up sooner, then we can of feelings, which Bhikkhu Buddhadasa calls wisdom at the point of contact, which means we wake up and we see that salayatana that
Yeah.
we manufactured in the mind, and then how we feel about it, because that's what impacts us, and it impacts us strongly. That's what gives rise to feeling. That's why pasa or contact is one of the items. It's not just that we see something on the outside world, then we manufacture something from it using the constituent parts of our memory and our ability to process data perceiving it. Then we come up with the object in the mind, and that object is what contacts us. And that contact then gives rise to feelings. I like it, I don't like it, etc. Those feelings that we have, if they're ignorant, then they will create a self. How does that happen? Through the clinging. If we like something, from the liking it goes to I want it. If I want it, that means that I've got to have it. It becomes from a want to a need, and that's where the clinging. I've got it. Well, who's got it? Who has got it? All right. This is what we mean by ownership. Ownership requires two things: an object to be owned and the owner. If there is no owner, then the object is not owned. And ownership is the taking a hold of it, especially at least mentally. It's mine. So we actually create a self in order to own something. If we don't own anything, there's no self to own it.
This is so interesting because of that it's really making Paticca Samuppada is waking you up to causality.
Exactly. And the faster we're awake, then the more causality we can see. We can begin to see the earlier things, those things that may have happened a nanosecond before and we were unaware of them. Now we're waking up fast enough to see it. Maybe a nanosecond is way too much. Let's call it a microsecond or even a tenth of a second.
This is interesting because this is the reason I think why I've never understood is that when you practice mindfulness, when you practice sati, your memory is better.
Well, that's because you're looking, you're paying attention,
But not like you'll
which
remember.
means you're taking in more input.
Yeah, it's weird. Like you'll remember like thoughts you had like 7 days ago. Like you can really do that. Like it's weird. Like you'll remember, like especially like it's sometimes when you're really like when I'm like doing and practice, uh it feels like the mind is figuring things out, like almost like in a really fluid way instead of me in the way. It's almost like it's thinking on the level of feeling instead of thinking.
Right. Okay. So now what we can do is we can take that from the perspective of looking at the fact that when we're talking about an event, that's something hard.
What
It's a
was it?
point in time, an event.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. But in fact, no, let's not look at it as a hard event. Let's look at it as a soft process.
Yeah. Fluidity.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So an example of that would then be the automobile accident. We see the automobile accident as an event.
Hmm.
But if we go back into the minds of the individuals who were driving the cars when that accident happened, we can see that that accident was not an event that happens now. It was a process from not paying attention, maybe eating a sandwich or being on the cell phone, not looking at what you're doing, not paying attention, and then having the accident. Okay, so what we think of as an event was actually a process, and it happened over a period of time. That in fact, even the actual process of the accident takes time in the sense that at each point is it as it's a now, but the it's not an event of the accident. First, it's the two bumpers touch, and then another one crumbles, and then this crumbles. And as the weight of the vehicles come in fact, they actually build vehicles now to crumple up, because they want them to absorb the force so that it's not affecting the passengers in the cars so much.
And this all is seen, like on a wisdom level, you would see that, and you wouldn't
You
like,
see the whole process, and
yeah.
it's not an event now, it's a process.
Wow, that's incredible. That's really incredible the way that that like it's incredible because I never put Paticca Samuppada and causality, like they work in the sense like they're practical. Like it's understood. There's a reason for causality and the sense of in the Buddhist teachings. Yeah.
Well, the Buddha worked with reality. He did not work. This is not a magical teaching. This is not
Yeah.
a philosophical teaching. This is extremely practical.
Yeah, and that's where again when the first phrase I said about witness and separated or maybe discerned from the field of action, which is the field of karma, doing things unwholesome, so or wholesome.
Hmm.
So for an arhat, he's above, he is witness, he is the knower of the world, right? Like a Buddha. Like the Buddha would say, I'm the knower of the
Yeah,
world.
yeah.
But he meant that he knew it.
Well,
He
how much
really
of the world do you have to know?
no, but he knew it like as it is. He didn't know it in the sense of meaning making,
All
right?
right. Well, here's the reason I'm asking that question is because in the Visuddhimagga, this word that you're talking about is actually the word is lokavitu, uh, being above the world is lokatara.
Lokatara.
Okay, lokatara is to be above the world. We use the word supramundane or transcendent or non-attached. That we're attached to the world. Here's the world. I'm attached, but now I'm not attached. Now I'm above the world. Okay, that's lokatara. Loka vitu means the knower of the world, but in this case, what we only need to know is it wholesome or is it not wholesome?
Yeah.
To where the Visuddhimagga understands this Loka vitu as the Buddha knows every fish,
No, 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 no.
he knows every
That's
shark.
that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't
That
make
doesn't
sense.
make sense at all.
Yeah.
No. But knower of the world means knowing that the world is dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. Knowing basically the mind,
Hmm.
how it all
Knowing the
works.
cause and effect relationship that manages everything.
Wow. And it's like you don't really see how big that wholesome and unwholesome means then in the context of everything that he taught. You just
Mm-hmm.
think that means a part of it, a part of the
Uh-huh.
teaching. Or like some, wholesome is just a little bit, and then there's meditation. Like that's how I would think about it, like in the past. Like there's wholesome, and then there's like jhanas, and then there's this, and then like fragmented everywhere. It's like very put together. You're putting it all together.
Well, that's exactly how it should be. But in fact, my good friend Achan Dhammavitu and I have had several long conversations that basically the topic of the conversation is, look, the Dhamma is not complicated at all. It's a tiny little thing. It's only one thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's only one little thing. The Buddha was right. He only teaches one thing: dukkha, dukkha, nirodha. So the Four Noble Truths is nothing but the unpacking of dukkha, dukkha, nirodha. This is suffering. This is it. This is the cause of suffering. This is what it's like to be free from suffering, dukkha, nirodha, and this is the method that we bring about this state of dukkha, nirodha. So the Four Noble Truths unpacks. Let's look at the second noble truth. What is the cause of suffering, or the cause of dukkha? Is greed, ill will, and delusion. If you look at Paticca Samuppada, what you will find there is step number 12 is dukkha, step number 1 is ignorance, and right there in the middle is the feelings, greed and ill will. So, in fact, Paticca Samuppada is nothing but the unpacking of the second noble truth. When you really are looking at what's going on, you're looking at how the mind works, and you have then the choice of particular points along the way of whether you're going to be mindful so that you can stay in the wholesome as
And
opposed to falling ignorantly into the unwholesome.
and did he have a shorter? I've heard you say he had a shorter version of Paticca Samuppada,
Yeah, the short version is the second noble truth.
but I meant like a shorter list. Instead of 12, it was like four or eight.
Well, we can look at it like this: it's a sequence of events, and that the foundation for that sequence of events is the five aggregates.
Yeah,
So within Paticca Samuppada, you're going to find all of the aggregates. Okay, in fact, in the formal definition of Paticca Samuppada, it goes from ajiva, ignorance, to sankhara. In the sankhara, you have the body. You have not just the body, but you also have thinking. You also not only have the verbal sankhara, but you also have the chitta sankhara, which is the feeling complex. So you have the body, you have thoughts, you have feelings, all of that stuff is wrapped up in the sankhara. So we're looking at the fact that with the aggregates, this sankhara is not me. I am not my memory base. Just like your PC is not the the fonts that the OCR software needs. Okay,
mm,
the data that's stored in your computer is not the computer.
yeah, yeah.
You can understand that, right?
Mm.
Okay, so that means that you are not your memory because that's what you've got stored up. Your memory base is the same thing as all the data on a computer. The computer is not the data. You are not your memories.
This is it's really like a heartwood, like some people would say, okay, so that means that the inside is the self, like not the outside, like like the computer, like no, it's like heartwood of the Bodhi tree in the sense of like,
Mm-hmm.
nope, there's absolutely nothing. Like there's
There
just
is no self in those sankharas, just like there is no self in perception, there is no self in consciousness, there is no self in the body, and no self in feelings. However, just like the automobile, when you take the bumpers and the seats and the interior and the motor and you put them all together, now as a unified system, that car then gives them a new thing. It's called transportation. That if you took all the wheels and all of the motors and all the gears and everything out and laid them out in a great big pile, then you ask the question, well, where's the car?
Yeah. No, no car.
There's no car here. All I have is a bunch of car parts. But
Yeah.
when I put all the parts together, that's when we have a car. And what is the value of the car is transportation. Now, I'm just substituting the word car here for chariot, and I'm talking about a sutta that's a dialogue between Nagarjuna and Melinda. But you can have modern day chariots is the car. What is carness? Carness, if there is carness, is the transportation that the car provides. It's not the beauty of a car in a showroom. It's the fact that you can get in that car, turn on the engine, and drive it off.
It's like the
Okay?
actual experience of the.
The spirit of the car is transportation. Okay? So you have your aggregates of the body, the feeling, the mind, the perception, the sankharas, your memories, all of that kind of stuff, the five aggregates. There's no you in any of it, anywhere. But when you put all of that stuff together, now you have the possibility of creating something new out of it. And one of the things that we ignorantly do with our new piece of transportation is we run it right into the wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who is that wall or what is that wall? Me.
Yeah. Yeah.
We create that me. We create that transportation. Okay,
Yeah.
so the actual transportation now, unfortunately, well, maybe not unfortunately, just it is, that the Buddha didn't have tools like we have with general systems theory. He didn't know neuroscience, but he certainly knew enough about neuroscience. He knew enough about the idea of general system theory to point out, look at all the constituent component parts here. There is no self. But if you put all of those parts together and run through this sequence of events, you can come up with something new that doesn't really exist. Transportation really does not exist.
Now, I feel like we could perfectly like go into the last type of, because this is a, I feel like everything is just summing up perfectly. It's like this is where I think, because I feel like I'm not different than most of the people that talk to you in the sense of we all have similar confusions.
Mhm.
And
We're
um
all we're all born in that culture, and that
yeah,
culture is confused culture.
yeah,
If it
yeah.
were, if it were not a confused culture, then the parents would play with their children instead of bossing them around.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Um like you said, we create something new. Now, the unwise would gratuitously take the self and use it again the same way it always has.
Hmm.
Now, I've heard in Zen used mastery of self, like the self, like you use the self, not like there is a self, but that you use
Be
it wisely.
careful. Be careful that there are many different definitions and subtle different changes in this word self.
Please, yeah, because I
The
come from
word
time,
self
so
has dozens of different translate or different definitions and translations, and so we need to be careful about the word self, just like we need to be careful about the word love,
mhm. And
because
that's what I'm saying. Because I read a lot of Ramana Maharshi. I read a lot of Kashmir Shah. They talk about the self, and then they talk about the ignorant jiva, and then they talk about the higher self, which is like
all of those are mental concepts.
yeah, yeah,
The
yeah, the concept,
reality is that these are just concepts. There's no actual
yeah.
self.
But that's how it's concept. So how can we as to not get trapped in that concept? Like, because obviously, are we creating a better self? Because like that's the whole also a little doubting.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right,
yeah.
sure. Depends upon the way that you're using the word.
Okay.
Let's use a different word for a moment just to give an idea of what we're talking about, and that is the word soul.
Mm-hmm.
Because anatta and atta would be better used the word soul rather than self, because the concept of an atta is something that's permanent, long-lasting, strong, and unique. Those are the various qualities. Why do I call it unique? Is because if you had a busload of people go over the side of the bridge and they all died at the bottom of the ravine,
Okay.
how is the karma machine going to figure out which person is which? Or if there's a God, then how is the God going to know which soul is which?
That's the whole thing, is that at the end of it, there is no one thing. There is no one.
That's why we want to make sure that we understand that there is no soul that is permanent and fixed and that is powerful enough to survive death and that is unique. In other
Yeah.
words, when the Buddha says that you are the heir of your karma, he's not talking about that after you die, that you're going to get your ass busted by the karma machine for the stuff you did in this life. It
Yeah.
means you're the heir of your actions right now.
Yeah.
If you have unwholesome thoughts, then you're going to be the heir to those unwholesome thoughts right now.
Yeah.
And so this is a problem with Buddhism that we have in the West, is this English language bad translation. Every Pali word that I know is badly translated into English.
Yeah. It's with a lot of things. It's not just Pali. It's with almost every religion.
Every language that way. Yeah, translation of language. I mean, they've even written movies and stuff called Lost in Translation.
Yeah, that's why it's never meant to be teached that
Much
way.
of the suttas are, in fact, are poetry.
Mm.
But poetry is notorious for not being well translated. That, in fact, some languages, due to their nature, are actually poetic. French is much more poetic than English. If you have endings of words like when you decline a noun, in English we don't have much declination, and so the various cases. But if we have a romantic language or a language that lends itself well to poetry, then the ending of the words will often be that way too. We have to search for that in English, but in Pali, it's built in. An example of that is Buddham Saranam Gacchami.
Yeah.
Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. What we're doing is we use the word Buddha. Why is it Buddham Saranam Gacchami? Why? Because it's in a different case. If you look at the translation correctly, you'll see that I go to the Buddha, which is an objective case. When I say I go to Tommy, we don't change the word Tommy. We don't say I go to Tamam, but we do in a way when we say I go to see them, they. You hear that M sound in them? Him? Whom? That's a remnant in English language of the dative case that is
The,
on every noun in Pali.
the
If
dative
you
case, you said?
dative case, the object,
Yeah.
okay, the object. In other words, Sam knows me. I know Sam. So you can see that we make a change in the object from the nominative case to the dative case, or from the name to the object. In our pronouns, we still have differences, but in our nomenclature, we don't change the case. So I go to Tommy or I see Tommy is the same as Tommy sees me. Okay, so I see the house, Tommy sees the house, I see Tommy. Would not be done in Pali. It would be I see Tommy. It would be I see Tamam. Tommy with an M sound at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, that when we have so many nouns that would be ending in dative case, then we can actually become quite poetic. Every noun we say it so that it ends in dative case, and everything begins to rhyme.
Yeah, it's like Pali was a picture language,
Yeah. Hmm.
like Sanskrit was.
Very, very ancient, and not only that, but many words served multiple purposes, just like they do in English.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So many words serve multiple purposes, but when we translate them out of the Pali into the English, we tend to get one word out of it, and we use that same English word for all of these occurrences of that same Pali word, where in fact it would be useful for us to change the language that we're using in English to better understand what the Pali actually was saying. And
yeah.
anatta is one of them. Being translated as self is completely confusing to everyone. But if you can understand it to the point of, oh, there is no soul, because we can understand that everything is temporary, and you solve that because the soul, by definition, is permanent.
Actually, there was a word you used earlier that I really love to replace the self translation is ownership, because everyone can really personally actually really understand that. Because soul, I guess like a lot of people really don't believe in a soul in America, but like in the sense like I've met at least, like there's a lot of people nowadays that don't believe in soul, but they believe in owner. I can still
Mm-hmm.
own things because a
Mm-hmm.
owner is different than a magic soul. So like a because I guess because in the Buddhist time it would have made sense more to say that because a lot of people thought they were like probably God or something, or like super out there and thinking that they were like, they had some power and they thought they were God or something. Um,
Here's
yeah.
something that you might be interested in,
Hmm.
and that is the word atmos as opposed to the word atom. All right. The word atom is what I had thought, and many others generally think, is when we use the word atomic, which means not splittable.
Okay.
And so we think of that the word ata comes from the word atom. But now we understand that that's not the case, that in fact the concept of an atom from Greek was actually about concurrent with the time of the Buddha. But there is a very much older word that we have to understand that is actually what we're looking at here. And here's where we can see that. Have you ever heard of Gandhi? Do you know what his first name is? What is it?
Actually,
Mahatma.
Mahatma Gandhi. Yeah.
Okay, take the Maha off and you have Atman.
Yeah. Atman. That's another word that's used.
That is not atom. It's not Maha atom. It's Ata. Excuse me, Maha uh,
Atman?
Atma.
Atma. Okay.
This word is where we get the word atmosphere. The Atma that is surrounding the earth. The sphere is the sphere of the Atma. This is where the word spiritual comes from. It's from the air. When
Wow.
we talk about a spirit, in fact, even with alcohol, why is alcohol called a spirit?
I don't
It's
know.
because it gives off a spirit.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Hmm.
It gives off a spirit. So the word spirit here, back to the old language, is atmos. And the word atma or anatta actually means no, you are not the atmos or the big self. There is no self there. Another way of talking about it is that no, you are not the air. You just breathe it in and breathe it out. But when you breathe in, you're breathing in the breath of life.
Yeah.
And so almost all of our religious history from all of the cultures throughout the world have to do with the air. That's where the word air comes from, by the way, is a contraction of the word atmos or atmosphere.
Yeah.
And it actually, this is what we mean when we say Mahatma Gandhi. That word translated as to great soul, not great self.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the mistake that the original translators like I.B. Honer and Riles Davies and that group made, was they translated the Pali wrong because they were looking at the wrong Greek word to understand it. They were looking at the word atom instead of atmos. And if they did, then they would have translated anatta as no soul. And
Yeah.
so they caused confusion, oh, so much confusion by translating that as no self. And now we're stuck with it. We are
Yeah.
stuck with so many English language words that just don't fit what we're doing. I mean, I can give you a long list. Concentration is not samadhi. Uh, the monks don't carry a bowl, they carry a pot.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
pot in the Pali, and yet they translated it into bowl. Why? I guess it's because Catholics don't have pots on their altar, but they do have bowls.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Another one, dukkha, translates to suffering. Most people are not suffering, but they are dissatisfied.
Yeah. And that's the better. I mean, they're getting better over time. And
Well, we keep talking to the about all of this and putting it out on the internet and whatnot like that. And in fact, some of the things that I would say is that 5 years ago, when you would read what was on Reddit and the stuff that's in the spiritual world, and you'll see a particular kind of mistake they make. Now, 5 years later, because the Noble Dhamma is getting out, some of those mistakes are no longer being made,
yeah.
or at least the Noble Dhamma is getting into uh, uh, is having an influence or so slowly on Reddit. An
Yeah.
example of that is they're they're beginning to use the word anapanasati,
Yeah.
which was a completely foreign word. Nobody used it before. 10 years
Yeah.
ago, nobody would know anapanasati. Now everybody kind of knows that it's a better word to use than meditation. In fact, meditation, you will not find meditation or anything like it in the Pali. We don't
Yeah.
meditate.
No.
Meditation is something Christians do.
Yeah. 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 It's I was gonna say, have you you would probably like, well, maybe not, but some of his words, Nana Theravera, Nana Theravera. He's really old. Um, he was he made the book called Notes on the Dhamma.
Uh huh.
Um, and he would translate things like boundless samadhi. He would never uh he would never like exchange the English for words that couldn't be translated, because he was also not from America, so he
Mm-hmm.
understood that, I guess. They have, but their translations are really rare. A lot of people don't know about them, because, and he puts the in his books, he puts the Pali next to the English, and he's like, yeah,
Right. A
yeah,
lot of the problems would be solved with within, let us call it Western Buddhism, if all of the words that were translated, all the important words, when I say important, all the words that are causing confusion, if they would put the Pali in there and maybe a footnote as to what that Pali word means, then we wouldn't be using words like concentration. I hear the words concentration all the time. They think that I meditate to concentrate the mind. Okay, right. But if you want to know what the Buddha taught, he didn't teach that.
yeah, like you would say boundless, or no boundaries, and that's how they would translate the higher like they would the Buddha would talk about boundless samadhi, and that's how they would translate it instead of infinite something.
No concept of infinity. The Buddha did not even have the concept of infinity. Why? because the mathematics of the day didn't have a division by zero.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
didn't even have a zero.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay,
And
so there was no concept of infinity.
no.
And so anytime that Bhikkhu Bodhi is using the word infinity in any of his translations, he needs to have a wake-up call. Don't use the word infinity. The Pali word is boundless.
Yeah. And this was exactly his thing. And he was very adept of also existentialism. Um, so like pathpress.org is a Buddhist like kind of organization where they sell books um, of like kind of like it's kind of like their style or something. I don't know. It's kind of like a very very unknown thing. Um, it's weird, but it's very beautiful how they translated words though. Like they were the best so far. I've never found better translators to Buddhism texts. And these guys were very didn't know them. No one very knew them. Their books were kind of like not popular as much. But they're actually extremely extremely like Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. It's almost incredible, actually. Um, but anyways, um,
Actually, that's another point, and that is Bhikkhu Buddhadasa spoke, let us call it, lower than ordinary Thai. He did not speak in a very high intellectual way. He spoke basic, um, almost low class, street language, you could call it. And yet, all of the translators, especially Santikaro, but Robert Bucknell is also doing this, and that is that they take the Thai translation, this low Thai, and translate it into highfalutin quality university language in
mhm.
English.
Santikaro, he was the guy. Have you seen YouTube? If you type in Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, you'll see like all his lectures.
All of the translations, most of the translations will have Santikaro's fingers on it.
Yeah, I thought he was translating live while Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was talking.
Sometimes,
Okay, okay.
occasionally, mostly no. Mostly Santacaro is getting the old tapes of
Yeah.
stuff that he wasn't there for. But there, especially the book Anapanasati, a manual for serious beginners, I believe is
I have
the
it.
name
Yeah.
of it. Okay. I don't think that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, if he knew the word serious, he would have approved of Santikaro using that.
Why?
Because anapanasati is the practice of coming out of being serious.
Yeah, yeah,
But in a way, you could say, okay, anapanasati is for serious beginners, but it is for the frivolous experts
yeah, yeah.
that we come out of the serious. Okay, but the translations then of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is a very high quality, almost university education kind of language, to where the actual Thai is rudimentary, low class. And so also that we could think of maybe the Pali language is also rudimentary and low class, but when it's translated into English, wow, is it highfalutin.
Yeah. It's like actually a great book. Being Dharma is one of the best books I read that isn't complicated by Ajahn Chah. Well, it wasn't by him, but they wrote his stuff down, and it's very similar. It's crazy because I read that book like 3 times, and I couldn't get it, even though it's almost the same thing like you said. Like he kept saying wholesome, unwholesome. Like it's very sim. It's not like highfalutin, but it's crazy. I couldn't understand it because of all the highfalutin stuff that I learned before,
Hmm.
and yeah,
Right. So the translations out of Pali and out of Thai often interfere with the actual teachings that were given in that original language.
yeah, and this
And,
is
and so
important.
that's why it takes more work than necessary.
I think in
That's
the
what my job is. I've already done all the work, and in fact, most of the work that I had to do was not even done by me. It was done by Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. I'm just sitting on his lap
yeah,
and
and
trying to
it's
teach low class Thai or at least low class Dhamma the way he did.
Yeah, it's a whole nother thing. It's really a whole nother thing. I mean, I'm not trying to say like it's not like great to have all this information, but it is detriment to
It
thinking
is
that
if you can pack it all together into one little small package, Duca
exactly.
Duca Narota, and I've got it.
Because like it'll be worse if we end up like having six, thousand Bibles and you know what I mean, end up like that because that's really
Hmm.
confusing. I mean, we're already almost there in the sense there's so many books, but I like this, like
We've
you
got
and
too
me.
many books.
Yeah.
People over the years have asked me, why don't you write a book? And it says,
Yeah.
what? How many books do you need? You got a whole library full of books, and you want me to write one, and you can go and put that on the shelf too? What's the
Yeah,
point?
I was I was actually gonna even ask that once, but I was like, he probably would just say like, go read Bhikkhu Buddha Dasa or something like that.
Yeah,
It's a
there's already been enough books. You don't need to read books. You need to sit down and read your own mind.
Yeah, and even then, I think even the most having having like people like you around, like physically in a monastery or something, or just someone around, because in reality, like I would never understood this probably until I was older or something. If it wasn't for you, like if I didn't meet you through Skype, right? Lately and all that.
Especially since the books themselves are not intentionally obscure, they just are obscure.
Yeah,
Obscure partly because the people who wrote the books didn't understand. There's in fact one particular point on the Dhamma talks that we know of that gave rise to the book that we just mentioned of Anapanasati for serious beginners, to where Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is teaching in Thai, but he knows a little English. And so when he hears Santikaro then translate him out of Thai into English, he punches Santikaro and says, no, 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 no. You got that all wrong. This is what I actually meant. And then Santikaro has to retranslate into English saying, excuse me, I screwed up. I didn't understand what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was saying at all. And so, and that happens.
yeah,
Even translators who are the ones who were designated, the formal translator, the Itz Cadets, Santikaro is on top of the pile. He's the best translator we have for Bhikkhu Buddhadasa,
yeah.
but he's also quite confusing.
Yeah, I feel like why don't they just teach Thai and English too? Like, I mean, I'm sorry, like English as he like a Thai monk is growing up or something.
Well, um, I would suggest that people who are really serious in the Dhamma and really want to know, especially if they're intending to become a teacher, they should learn some Pali. Not enough to where you can actually speak Pali fluently. I don't think anybody on the planet Earth can do that.
We don't need that anymore.
Don't need that. But on Dhamma Central, or excuse me, Sutta Central website, they have most of the translations by Sujuto will be done so that you can put the Pali, English, line by line, a line of English, a line of Pali, a line of English, a line of Pali. And that's especially with the rollover dictionary. Now you can really look at what's going on.
Yeah,
That in fact, many of the things that are not understood, let's say it this way, that the language of the Pali is a magical language, and that the magical language of Pali was used by the people of the time to say real things.
hmm,
Magical language was used to describe real things. In
yeah,
English, we use magical language only to describe magic, and we use real things to describe reality, with a few exceptions. An example of that would be in Hollywood, they will talk about devas.
yeah,
What is a deva in Hollywood? It's the star. It's the girl who knows how to really belt out a song, okay? Well, in the Pali, the word deva is used for high class people. that in fact the king would be called a deva. He would be called a deva to his face. And so now when we see the Pali and see the word deva, the translators will translate that word deva into gods. And the
No.
Pali didn't mean the word God when it used deva. It's just talking about a king or a prince or an ordinary person using magical language to describe a real thing.
Yeah, this is the same thing with Carl Jung wrote about this when he went to visit India and he studied different yogas. And he said, no, no, these colors and all these names mean physical things to them.
Things,
Yeah, like
right?
physical medicine, things like that.
Absolutely. We're using magical language to describe real things.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
because of the English language and we being raised in the English language, we assume that when they're using magical language, they're talking about magical things.
It's crazy because he even said we as Westerners or modern people start from this and not from they start from the like the chakra thing. It's a
From
funny
the Hara,
analogy. They start
right?
from we start from the crown, which is all spiritual magic, and
Mm-hmm.
then they start from the bottom up,
Mm-hmm.
like in a real way. Which is why, if you actually notice in modern culture, there's a lot more like stories about seeing things, like in the sense of like not just a myth, but like I really saw it. Like there's these cultural archetypes or things that people see if they let their mind go crazy or something like that, or they do the something like that. But it's
Or
unrelated.
even go clear in a way that we can see things, see them clearly, but have no language to describe it.
Yeah, yeah,
And so we will use magical language to describe real things, and then the audience will hear that magical language and imagine magical things.
yeah. Until you sit down with the teacher behind the closed doors.
Right.
Yeah, it's
To
funny
recognize,
because
no, this is all absolute, ordinary, real reality.
yeah,
The absolute, ordinary, real reality that some things are wholesome and some things are not wholesome.
yeah. It's funny because Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, when he came to America, he called one of the presidents at the time. I'm the president at the time. In
Mm-hmm.
public, he called him a rakshasa, and
Uh
that's
huh.
like a demon or something. And then somebody asked him behind closed doors, "What did you really mean that? How can you say that?" He's like, "No, everybody's the same. Everybody's ordinary. It was just for people. It was just a play. It was for ordinary people because in the sense like he can't say that to everyone because not everyone will understand that yet. Like
Mm-hmm.
everything is just or everybody's the same. It's all the same.
Another example of that are the parables of Jesus.
Yeah, yeah. The
Okay,
Samaritan.
those parables are designed to only speak to those who can really hear what's going on.
Yeah,
Everybody else turns them into magic.
yeah. Well, yeah, it's hard. The teacher, in a sense, I feel like prepares you, and that's what I felt like still even, like in the sense with you, like you kind of prepared me in the sense, and still in the sense, like I don't even know where I'm going, but it's awesome. It's like the sense, it's like
Well,
that.
you're not going anywhere, and that's the awesome part.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you?
It's
Here's an example. In a train yard or in the bus station, we have the feeling that the bus is moving or that the train is moving because we look out the window and we see the train over there moving. And we think it's me that's moving, especially if you look on both sides and you got two trains moving and our train is sitting still, but it gives us the delusion that we're moving.
yeah,
It's quite disconcerting if you've ever done it.
yeah. No, I don't think I've done that before, but I know what
Okay.
you're talking about
You
because I've
haven't
seen.
you haven't been in a bus before and seen another bus take off and you think that your bus is going forward where in fact that bus is backing up.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I know what you're talking about. I have, yeah. Yeah, that is
Okay.
it's weird, especially there's a lot of things in life that we experience that twist perception.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people don't notice it, but like little like even this. you know?
But if you think about it, then in that regard, about which train or which bus is moving, means that if we do a little bit of investigation, we can figure out, oh, this bus is not moving, that one is moving,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But it takes an investigation. That's what the Buddha is all about. Let's start looking at what's going on so that we can get a better understanding of reality,
Yeah.
especially within our own mind. We have to look, have to keep looking.
Yeah. And that's the
So
fun part.
back to the point about paticca samuppada. How quick can you wake up so that you can get what's going on in the mind in the begin? Here's an example. When we are brand new or even no Dhamma at all, we get angry, we get into an argument with someone, but then eventually we wake up. Sometime the argument is going to be over. If no one wakes up, we're going to wind up in violence, and if no one wakes up in even in the violence, someone's going to wind up dead.
Hmm.
But sometime or another, before violence, people will wake up. An example of that is the guy who goes having an argument with his wife, and he recognizes that he said something wrong, and he'll storm out of the house and slam the door, which means the argument is over. It may not be over in the mind, but both the people in that argument know that this argument is not going right. There's dukkha in here. Let me get out of this. So there is a wake up for everybody. We do wake up. If we don't wake up at all, we're going to wind up dead.
Yeah. It's almost like we're aware, but we're not aware that we're aware.
Mm, okay.
Like,
But there
yeah.
is a bit of a wake up. So the
Yeah.
question is, how soon can you wake up? Can you wake up before you get really angry? Can you wake up before you say your first angry word?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you wake up to the feelings that are arising for the anger? Then, can you wake up to recognize that the way you perceived things was incorrect?
Yep.
Then, can you wake up down to the point of consciousness? Okay,
That's
so
where,
it's faster and faster until you get down to the point where you recognize that you do not have to take a mental object to perceive. You do
wow.
not have to take
Yeah.
you do not have to take a visual object
Yeah. Yeah.
to perceive it.
That's
But
funny because,
you can leave it without an object so that there is nothing to perceive. We keep
that's
moving
interesting
from
because,
object to object to object to object until we're not taking any object anymore. And now we're just complete open perception, or excuse me, open consciousness with not processing any of it.
I mean,
And also
that's,
look at it like this. Normally, when we live in the regular world, we see something and then we think about it and then we create something, and that's what impacts us and that's how we feel. But
mhm,
if we begin to see that sequence of events, we can come down to where I can just take an object, but before I even bother to perceive it, I'll go take another object, and then another object, and then another object, until I stop taking objects so that there's nothing left to perceive. What that means is now we're taking in a flood of information because so much is happening. But normally, what we do is we'll take one thing and we'll process it. Then we'll take another thing and we'll process it. But when the mind gets really fast, we can come down to the point that we're not processing anymore, we're just absorbing.
wow, that's beautiful. I mean, that's incredibly, I mean, I see it as beautiful.
Yes, uh-huh. Right. All right. But anyway, let's call this one short because we've been going at it about 3 hours now, and I've got other students calling. But this has been quite a delightful talk.
Yes, it has. I'm gonna reflect on it, and it's so much, so I can't wait to, look.
All right. Well, we'll see you in a few days, Dennis, and we'll continue talking. Meanwhile, enjoy.
You will.
Allow everything to be beautiful in your mind because your only option is to make it ugly.
Yeah.
Allow the beauty because that's what's in your mind. but also understand that the beauty is something that you're doing with the reality. That reality itself is not beautiful, but you choose to accept it as beautiful.
I will. Thank you.
All righty. We'll see you.